Hello everyone, I'm very glad that you listened to my story. Please give me a follow and like the video if you enjoyed it. Feel free to comment and provide feedback so I can improve the sound quality. Yes, we invite you to listen to part 6 of the series. Chapter 86, Chapter 86, Chapter 85, King of the White Tower, Part 7_1. Chapter 86, Chapter 85, King of the White Tower, Part 7_1. It turned out that overly ambitious wishes were unrealistic. Although someone did come knocking on the door the next morning, it wasn't the person he was hoping to see. "Good morning, Mr. Fu." The female priestess who had guided him during the competition bowed deeply at the door, dressed immaculately. "I am your guide for today. If you'd like to take a tour around the island, I can accompany you throughout." It wasn't easy. Fu Qian looked at the face of the female priestess, which had returned to its divine grace. She had been terribly frightened towards the end of the previous day, but after a night of psychological rebuilding, she had surprisingly recovered. The competition was still scheduled for the evening, so he indeed had plenty of time during the day to wander around this so-called den of decadence. "That would be great, thank you." Fu Qian nodded in agreement. Most of the time, Fu Qian was an easygoing person, to the extent that he had not even asked for the name of the priestess. Just as Vale had said, after winning the first day's competition, all areas had been open to him. And with the female priestess leading the way, they encountered no obstacles whatsoever. There are a total of 7 islands here, and where we are now is considered the outskirts, mainly consisting of basic infrastructure. The female priestess walked ahead, assuming the role of a tour guide. On the way here, he had already seen several groups like theirs. Indeed basic. Fu Qian looked at a group of women striking poses in front of a sign and nodded approvingly. In just a few seconds, several coquettish glances were thrown his way, one even from a woman whose wings on her back were spread upwards. Along with her pale, slender neck, she looked like a goose poised for action. The White Tower where yesterday's competition took place is located on Central Island, with tunnels from all 6 of the other islands leading there. The female priestess, pretending not to notice what Fu Qian was looking at, continued her introduction. "There are mainly 2 core buildings on Central Island. Apart from the White Tower, there's also the laboratory that serves as the heart of the island." She pointed to a building next to the towering White Tower. "That's the one. I believe it's also a big reason many people come to the Ring Islands. The Limb Attachment Laboratory. In this world, it's certainly one of the top achievements in technology, albeit on an unconventional path." Following the direction she pointed, Fu Qian took a careful look. Compared to the White Tower, this building was much more low-key. It had a ring shape, occupying the southeast corner of the island, and was quite large in size. But it seems that not many people have actually done so. Fu Qian pointed out, referring to her body. From his observations the previous day, at least she didn't have any additional parts attached to her body. "Everyone has different objectives. My reason for working here is quite simple," she said with a smile, not minding the conversation shifting towards her. "The White Tower Company offers so much. Just a few days of work can amount to a year's income for me, and I also get to stay on the legendary Ring Islands for a while. In fact, many people are in the same situation, but not everyone can take the money and leave." As she spoke, she gestured towards the direction of the laboratory. "Understood." Fu Qian nodded in realization. The Limb Attachment Laboratory was right there. Even the possibility of acquiring various transcendent abilities through it represented a huge temptation for the average person. On the Ring Islands, you earn, you spend, with no thought of taking any back home. Besides Central Island, we can go wherever we want. Where would you like to go first? Unfortunately, the Central Island Executive Office was what interested me the most. Fu Qian thought for a moment, then took out the badge he had received the previous day from his pocket. "Do you know where to find them?" "This." Upon seeing the item in Fu Qian's hand, the female priestess's face immediately turned pale, and after carefully confirming it. "This is the emblem of the Rebirth Club, on Island number 5, not far from here," she said quickly and softly, with her head bowed. "How do you have this?" "From what I know, such emblems are quite rare on the island and not numerous. Someone gave it to me, but why do you look like you've seen something dirty?" "The Rebirth Club is quite notorious around here, their style." The female priestess pondered her words for a moment. is rather unrestrained. Are you really going to go there directly? Fu Qian nodded, noticing her troubled expression. Forget it, just point me in the direction, and I'll go there myself. No need to trouble her further. Relieved, the female priestess pointed him in the right direction and then ran off with an apologetic face. It was clear that the Rebirth Club had a bad reputation here. However, as the saying goes, even bad publicity is still publicity. The instinctive repulsion it caused suggested that the club must have had some extraordinary aspects. Following the directions, Fu Qian quickly found his destination. In front of the heavy red wooden door stood a muscular man with his arms crossed, guarding the place. After showing him the badge, the muscular man scrutinized it closely, then opened the wooden door and let Fu Qian in. Bang! Fu Qian had hardly entered when the door shut promptly behind him. Is this the club? Fu Qian frowned at the scene in front of him. It seemed that the place was once a small bar. However, there was no music or decadent pleasure now. Instead, dry corpses were scattered everywhere, seated or lying, remaining in various postures as if they still continued their last actions. Most conspicuous among them was a centaur in front of the counter. Yes, that kind of legendary creature with 2 arms and 4 legs. This one, though not particularly tall, was draped in a tattered cloth, which, despite being ragged and hole-ridden, still showed signs of its former splendor. All this was shrouded in an omnipresent layer of black, white, and gray dust. What a picture of solitude. Fu Qian walked past the centaur display, found a spot at the counter, and sat down, at the same time touching the surface of the counter. The layer of black and white dust on the table surface smeared directly onto his fingers, turning the skin pale. In less than 10 seconds, his entire body was covered in that grayish-white color, and his skin looked as withered as a dry corpse, as if he had experienced a century of vicissitudes in an instant. But Fu Qian remained unfazed, leaning back in his chair and closely observing the centaur beside him. Aren't the legs a bit too long, proportionally speaking? As he was observing intently, the spear that the centaur's right hand had been raising fell silently. Clang! Fu Qian, without even looking up, extended his left index and middle fingers upward, deftly catching the sharp spear tip. In the past, he might have either slapped such a stealth attack away or dodged in some direction. But as a player who had just completed special training yesterday, he tried the more impressive-looking spiritual acumen finger. The results proved to be quite effective. Greater force came from the spear, as the centaur seemed to want to pull back its weapon. Unfortunately for it, Fu Qian's fingers were like a vice, unyielding no matter how much force was applied. 2 seconds later, Fu Qian twisted his wrist. Even under such a strained lever action, the spear in the centaur's hand was forcibly pulled out, causing the creature to stagger back several steps in a twisted manner. A woman's moan sounded. Chapter 87, Chapter 87, Chapter 86, King of the White Tower, Part 8_1. Chapter 87, Chapter 86, King of the White Tower, Part 8_1. Clap, clap, clap. Applause sounded. It was like an old photograph being restored, colors slowly emerging in the space before me. And as the black, white, and gray rapidly receded, all the mummified bodies it had covered quickly transformed back to their human appearances, one by one stirring to life. Among them, the one behind the bar, who was even clapping enthusiastically, turned out to be Ji Ping, the one who had given me the badge last night. Welcome, welcome. I knew I wasn't wrong about you. Ji Ping applauded as he picked up a bottle of liquor and filled the glass in front of Fu Qian. A toast to our new friend. Fu Qian noticed that the gray eyeball in the palm of Ji Ping seemed different from the last time they had met. It was tightly shut now. The recent illusion must have something to do with that. I can't drink while on duty. Fu Qian casually made an excuse, not taking the glass offered to him. Besides, your welcoming ceremony doesn't seem very friendly. Not friendly enough, when Jenny herself is welcoming you. Ji Ping responded with an exaggerated look of surprise, then snapped his fingers towards someone nearby. A trotting sound came from behind, and as Fu Qian turned around, he noticed the centaur had undergone a transformation. Her heaving chest, her swaying body, under the custom black leather, her pale skin was exposed as she walked. Most importantly, beneath the dense brown hair was unexpectedly the face of a young woman. Fu Qian gave special attention to her back, where the broken fabric had been, now covered by a black golden cloak embroidered with an intricate pattern that fell behind her, covering her uplifted buttocks. The full and firm hind legs were likely her original ones, while the two front legs, equally pale and slender, unmistakably belonged to some equine creature. No wonder the centaur didn't appear very large to me earlier. Fuqian nodded to the lady and handed her the spear he was holding. My apologies for any offense. Humph. Lady Jenny did not seem pleased, took the spear without a word, went over to the bar, and drained a glass in one gulp. The drink had been half consumed already, with lipstick marks still visible. Clearly, these people had been indulging in revelry before I arrived. Ji Ping chuckled and topped up Jenny's glass. I told you Mr. Fu is exceptional, now do you believe me? She just snorted again and turned her head away. What does Mr. Fu think of our Jenny? Ji Ping chuckled again and turned to Fuqian. Graceful and charming. Fuqian commented blandly. This was no lie. In fact, if one did not consider her previous form, solely based on her present shape, she could be described as having symmetrical limbs with graceful lines. The beauty of both forms blended at a remarkable angle, a piece of top craftsmanship seen thus far. One should not have a narrow view of aesthetics, true art must touch the soul. What I'd told Tanning was certainly not baseless. However, Fuqian added another sentence. If memory serves, limb attachment has strict regulations regarding body proportions. This lady's condition looks quite dangerous. He wasn't talking nonsense. Ever since he learned about limb attachment, he had researched quite a bit of information on this topic. Although the White Tower Company had obtained a permit from the Night Watchman, the Night Watchman had made extremely strict rules to prevent unlimited modifications and ethical issues. There was even a strict formula for calculation. Going over by the slightest bit was not allowed. Not only the person involved but also Ji Ping appeared deeply moved. Mr. Fu certainly has a good eye. After a few seconds of silence, Ji Ping praised with a click of his tongue. Jenny's modifications just hit the upper limits of the design. Rest assured there wasn't a single iota of excess. I see. Fuqian looked at Jenny, who was wearing a look of anger. It's a pity. What's a pity? The latter, who had been glaring at him, finally couldn't resist speaking up. If you added a tail, the effect would probably be even better. Fuqian gestured behind her. Was this guy serious? Ji Ping looked surprised as he glanced at Jenny's back, then let out a chuckle. Perhaps, but now our Jenny is a superstar, with quite a high level of fame. Really? Fuqian didn't particularly doubt Ji Ping's words. Flaws or not, for those with special proclivities, her look was the epitome of deep dark fantasy. It was no surprise she had garnered numerous fans. You haven't just invited me here today to judge her, have you? Can you now explain what this is all about? Fuqian took out the badge he'd been given and placed it on the table. Of course not, I believe you've already learned a bit about us. Ji Ping said with a grin. Actually, our purpose is quite simple. I wonder if you're interested in joining the club. Fuqian frowned at him. I thought you had to be a member of the archipelago to join you. Normally, that's the case, but that's not a problem for you, is it? That was true. So far, he hadn't seen many who could fight well, and winning would be a breeze. Unless the White Tower Company shamelessly inserted some of their own people at the last minute. Suddenly, Fuqian felt that this possibility was quite likely. Actually, I'm very curious. Seeing that Fuqian hadn't spoken, Ji Ping spoke again. With your strength, why did you come to the archipelago? Those rewards that others are clamoring for, I believe they hold no temptation for you. You may continue to be curious. Meanwhile, tell me, what benefits are there to joining your club? Fuqian snorted with the air of a master, choosing to answer the question with another question. To join us? Of course, there are excellent benefits. Ji Ping's smile did not wane. Do you know why this place is called the Rebirth Club? He showed the palm of his hand. I believe you've just experienced its effects. To be honest, I was once just an ordinary person, but now with its help, I am able to set up predicaments that even many transcendents cannot solve. Our club is composed of a group of simple enthusiasts, with the shared belief that limb attachment is not just a simple patchwork, it should be a sublimation of life. Everyone can undergo rebirth as a new form of life by finding the part that fits them. Whether they are ordinary people or transcendents. And by joining us, not only will you have an immensely wide range of choices, but you can also undergo this process an infinite number of times until you achieve a perfect state of fusion. This was full of pseudoscientific vibes. Watching the impassioned Ji Ping, Fu Qian sighed inwardly. He had no interest in the so-called sublimation that Ji Ping spoke of. However, from the information conveyed in Ji Ping's words, his own judgment was correct. The Rebirth Club was backed by no simple entity. The freedom to choose at will plus unlimited attempts. If they weren't bluffing, they must have considerable control over the laboratory. Chapter 88, Chapter 88, Chapter 87, King of the White Tower, Part 9_1. Chapter 88, Chapter 87, King of the White Tower, Part 9_1. Unwarranted kindness is either deceitful or thieving. Fu Qian looked at Ji Ping's fervent face and remained utterly unmoved. Consider this, as a suspect competitor who has slaughtered many, a strongly mystical organization approaches you directly, exuding an intense level of goodwill, and even extending an invitation to join them. What could their purpose be? 1. They believe you possess unparalleled talent, instantly falling for you, unable to control their admiration, and they decide to put the full weight of their organization behind you, making you an invincible force. 2. A test. As high as Fu Qian's self-love might be, he still considered the first possibility highly unlikely. So, the question arises again, as a competitor with ulterior motives, how should you respond when someone of unclear affiliations tests you? According to Fu Qian's life experience, it's best to make those who test you wary of you. No matter the nature of their intentions, this was the maximally beneficial method. Thus, in the midst of all the focused attention, Fu Qian did not speak. He played with the badge in his hand, wearing a smile that wasn't quite a smile as he watched Ji Ping until the latter's expression turned from fervent to stiff. Clang! The atmosphere in the bar palpably tensed, and Jenny Ma once again raised her spear. With a snort, Fu Qian didn't even glance at her, merely flicking his finger. The badge nimbly flew out, whirling and spinning on the counter. By the time the spinning stopped, he had already left the bar, drifting away. Thud! Only when the sound of the badge hitting the ground rang out did the bar come back to life. What's with the attitude? So many people want to join but don't get the chance. Regaining her composure, Jenny exhaled, still quite indignant about the recent events. Heh! To everyone's surprise, Ji Ping, looking in the direction Fu Qian had left, showed not the slightest bit of anger. Don't be mad. Believe me, he's one of us. Amidst a sea of astonished looks, Ji Ping gave a mysterious smile and left them behind, making his way to a room in the back. How did it go? An elderly voice asked. Our interactions haven't been particularly pleasant for the time being, but I think someone as stubborn as Ibu will definitely dislike him even more, Ji Ping said confidently. Good, if he had accepted outright, it would have been suspicious, replied the elderly voice with a hum. Since he isn't one of their kind, we'll find an opportunity to show him our sincerity later on. These people are really efficient. The competition that evening started on time the next day. In the prep room, Fu Qian noticed that not only had the arena he destroyed yesterday been rebuilt, but the ground had also undergone special reinforcement. At the moment, all three arenas were a hubbub of activity. Compared to the day before, the general level of the contestants had significantly improved. Of course, the proportion of non-transcendents had decreased as well. The female priestess had had a rigid expression on her face since she entered, clearly indicating that her psychological build-up from the previous day had collapsed. From this, one could tell that the Rebirth Club's reputation must be quite poor. Fu Qian shook his head internally. However, this was not surprising. From that Jenny woman alone, it was evident that these people had, to some extent, become excessively fanatical. In such an unrestrained environment, it would be difficult not to become twisted. Of course, understanding did not mean approval. Fu Qian had no intention of joining such a perverse organization, but considering their influence, it would be a pity not to make use of them. Today's departure in full style was all about the art of catch and release. Let's see what their next move will be. Hasn't the wait today been a bit too long? The clanking of iron armor sounded, and Fu Qian looked up to see the blood-stained Black Knight walking in from outside. If he remembered correctly, this was the second time the knight had gone out. Yet there he was, still waiting, which was somewhat abnormal no matter how you looked at it. Ladies and gentlemen, I have good news. Right then, the host's excited voice rang from outside. 2 rounds of duels have passed, but we still have one lucky warrior who hasn't fought yet, and I believe you all know what this means. Wow. A wave of cheers thundered through the audience. That's right, next up, we're fortunate to witness a special program we've not seen in a long time. Huh. Fu Qian frowned. That is, the lucky warrior versus the forbidden behemoth. In the midst of overwhelming cheers, Fu Qian saw his number appear on the central display. Shameless, they really are shameless. The most eye-catching competitor from yesterday was now facing a boss after 2 rounds of buys. Isn't that a bit too obvious? However, the blatant corruption of the organizers only sparked an intense response from the audience, creating an atmosphere as lively as New Year's. Indeed, people love their entertainment. At that moment, following the host's direction, the blazing lights shone over. With the whole arena watching, Fu Qian walked out unruffled. All the platforms had now sunk into the ground, turning the empty space into a massive gladiator arena. So, who will our warrior be facing today? Who indeed is the enemy? The host's voice came again. Let's have our chief executive officer select the final opponent for him. The lights shifted, and Bai Jinting stood up in the stands, smiling as he took a tablet. After swiping a few times, he clicked confirm with a satisfied expression. All right, the warrior's opponent has been selected. Please give our staff a few minutes to prepare. In the meantime, the audience might like to guess what kind of behemoth will appear. The host continued to stir the crowd. Fu Qian, however, was indifferent to this, his attention wholly on the stands where Bai Jinting was. The red-haired, black-robed demigod Ibu was seated not far from Bai Jinting. Right after stepping out of the ready room, he had felt a peculiar sense of being watched. Following his gut, he saw it was that demigod. Even though Ibu seemed to be resting with his eyes closed, Fu Qian could still feel that every move he made was being tracked. That demigod was likely the biggest threat to him now, and a hurdle he must overcome. As a legendary demigod, hiding his true strength under his observation seemed unlikely. No matter how he performed, he was bound to be a prime focus of attention. Why not try the opposite approach? Suddenly, after a few minutes had passed, a heavy thud sounded, and a gigantic box over 4 stories high was placed heavily onto the arena. A deep growl echoed as the box was rocked violently from the inside. That's right, it is the forbidden behemoth. Crocodile Demon. As the host made the final announcement, the box burst open with a slam. It's really a damn crocodile demon. Fu Qian scowled, eyeing the massive creature not far away. It was a crocodile-like monster with long hair on its back, its massive jaws over 5 meters long lined with fearsome sharp teeth that extended all the way down into its throat. At that moment, its mouth was almost at a 180-degree angle, letting out an enraged roar. Chapter 89, Chapter 89, Chapter 88, King of the White Tower, Part 10_1. Chapter 89, Chapter 88, King of the White Tower, Part 10_1. Speaking of which, this was the first time he had encountered a transcendent creature of this world. Whether it was the initial werewolves and maggot people, or the remnants aggregate in the furnace, they essentially still bore traces of humanity and weren't of this pure beastly form. In summary, his PvE experience wasn't abundant. It must be said that the appearance of this creature was quite a challenge to the imagination, and the oppressive feeling brought on by its immense size was extremely strong. He wondered where White Tower Company had acquired such a ferocious beast. After a bout of furious roaring, the crocodile monster finally locked onto its target, its massive one-eyed head staring intently over. Thump. Thump. The huge hind claws hit the ground, each step gouging deep indentations in the solid surface. The next moment, the upper body of the beast arched back high, roaring again with an unstoppable charge forward. Fu Qian dodged delicately to the side, evading the head-on assault, and with a flick of his fingers, he sent an air bullet flying. He didn't expect much damage, mainly just to test the strength of the creature. Indeed, the defense of the creature was shockingly high. The air bullet, which could blow through a human body, barely left any mark on it. The crocodile monster charged past him, sprinting over 100 meters, leaving a long deep trench in its wake before eventually crashing into the perimeter of the arena. Boom. Half the stands shook, and people fell like dumplings, cries of distress merging into a chorus. However, such a dramatic impact only confused the crocodile monster for less than half a second. Its massive tail swiped, turning a few lucky spectators into mush, and then the crocodile monster turned around, again setting its sight on Fu Qian. This bloody scene elicited cheers from the stands, and amidst the screams, some were even thrown down. With toughened skin and exceptional vitality, this thing was very hardy. It'd be difficult to inflict substantial damage without striking a vital area. Fu Qian's mind raced. The problem was its size. Its hind legs were even taller than his own head, and with it running around, hitting a weak spot was no easy task. Wait a minute, it's very large. Fu Qian thought for a moment and took a deep breath. The next instant, the sound of shattering and cracking filled the air. As blood coursed through him, all the bones and muscles in his body began breaking and expanding recklessly, swelling in all directions at an alarming rate, and his body quickly grew taller. When it all ended, Fu Qian had transformed into a giant twice his original height. Not only that, but his entire right arm, by his will, had turned into a sharp long claw. Indeed, standing higher did provide a broader view. His visibility had improved greatly. The only regret was that even the best quality of clothing couldn't withstand such expansion, and they had burst and shredded during his transformation. As someone considerate of public decency, Fu Qian acutely noticed this and very civilly formed a set of ironman-shaped bone armor for himself. This state couldn't be maintained for long, he needed to make it quick. While both his size and strength had greatly increased, the tangible desire for slaughter also kept hammering at his consciousness, and if too much time passed, he feared he might lose SAN points. This wasn't a realm he should be touching upon at his current state. The intelligence of the crocodile monster obviously wasn't high. It ignored Fu Qian's transformation. Now that it had regained its balance, it charged at him once more. Bring it on. Facing the beast charging like a tank, Fu Qian didn't evade this time. Leaning forward, bending at the waist, he gathered momentum. As the crocodile monster closed in with its fierce winds and opened its enormous jaws to bite, Fu Qian extended his right-hand long claw at the same time. Amid a world-shaking cry of agony, the crocodile monster ran wild for more than 10 meters before it collapsed thunderously to the ground. From its abdomen to its tail, a terror-inducing wound was slashed open, from which dark blue blood gushed out, pouring into the trench. Fu Qian strode forward. SAN points decreased by 1. The notification sound by his ear caused him a pang of heartache. Speak of the devil, and he shall appear. My SAN points really dropped. Who? The sound of the wind arose, as the fallen crocodile monster swept over with its blood-stained tail, only to be kicked away by Fu Qian's foot. Further ahead, sharp fangs formed within the wound on its belly, opening wide in an attempt to swallow Fu Qian whole. You're using Saint Fighter's skill on yourself. Fu Qian dodged with ease once again, and firmly stepped on its lower jaw. At that moment, a dazzling golden bolt of lightning was gathering in the creature's gaping mouth, the proximity causing his skin to tingle with numbness. It seemed ready to unleash some sort of deadly final move. However, Fu Qian did not give it another chance, stepping on the lower jaw and prying open the upper jaw with both hands before exerting a sudden force. In the midst of a terribly ghastly roar, the tough hide crumbled to pieces. The crocodile monster's massive mouth was torn apart into 2 halves, its gathering electric light dissipating feebly. Cheers 10 times more vigorous than its agonized screams erupted from the stands, having already forgotten the incident with the person who fell earlier. Having dealt with his opponent, Fu Qian did not rush to change back but instead raised his head, looking in the direction of Bai Jinting's stands. In the next moment, he lifted half of the crocodile monster's head towards that direction. This provocative act left even the host at a loss for words momentarily. Bai Jinting, however, remained as composed as ever, still sitting immovably like Mount Tai, his smile undiminished. Fu Qian's target was not him in the first place. The demigodibu beside Bai Jinting was already standing up at this time. Humph. With a cold snort, a sun-like dazzling orb of lightning appeared in midair above the white tower, its intense brilliance nearly blinding onlookers. In the next moment, hundreds, perhaps thousands of silver-white electric snakes erupted from the orb, striking down into the arena below, their terrifying thunder suppressing all other sounds. The crocodile monster's corpse instantly turned to ash, and the lightning cage enveloped the entire arena before quickly contracting inward, compressing until it was right in front of Fu Qian. In the face of this terrifying sight, Fu Qian remained unruffled, overflowing with a murderous aura, standing eye to eye with the legendary demigod. Just as some thought a fight was about to break out, the immovable Jinting finally reacted, nodding at Ibu and saying something. The latter snorted again, and the entire sky of silver light dissipated in an instant, as he turned and sat back in his place. Sorted. Fu Qian's body also shrank back, reverting to his normal form. Of course, below the waist, he was still covered with the formed bone armor. This was the effect he wanted. Feeling a little weak for the first time, Fu Qian was extremely satisfied with how the situation had developed. Of course, he wasn't full to bursting with a show of protest against the behind-the-scenes manipulation. Since hiding his abilities in front of a demigod was impossible, why not just go big? A fierce fighting spirit, a thirst for victory, and a mockery of rigged endeavors. Portraying himself as someone who would stop at nothing for success might be better than shrouding himself in secrecy. Of course, there was also one more point: he had shown an intent and courage to confront a demigod. If this entity had any sworn enemies, it was about time they paid a visit. Chapter 90, Chapter 90, Chapter 89, King of the White Tower, Part 11_1. Chapter 90, Chapter 89, King of the White Tower, Part 11_1. In fact, the visitor arrived even sooner than expected. After successfully stealing the show and igniting the audience's passion to a boiling point, an uninvited guest knocked on the door that very night. Fu Qian went to open the door and found an elderly man in gray standing outside. "Mr. Fu, hello." The visitor was shrouded head to toe in a voluminous cloak, without a single hair on his eyebrows or head, his face full of wrinkles and bearing a mysterious smile. "I am Lu Ming, and I was wondering if you would be free to join me on a tour of the islands." "Tour the islands?" Fu Qian looked down at his right hand, covered by the wide sleeve. Although it was wrapped up tight, the shape was clearly off. It was likely not factory original. "Sure." Seeing Fu Qian's straightforward response, Lu Ming chuckled and immediately headed out to lead the way. A boat had long been waiting by the island, and Fu Qian followed Lu Ming onto it, one after the other. Mr. Fu's display of power today at the arena was truly impressive. Once seated, the boatman wordlessly began to row, and Lu Ming, smiling, spoke up first. "Some of our people were a bit impolite yesterday, and I'm mainly here to extend my apologies today." "Your people?" Fu Qian thought for a moment. "Rebirth Club." "Correct, I asked them to invite Mr. Fu, but I didn't expect things to become somewhat disagreeable." "It wasn't disagreeable, just a bit boring." "Boring?" Lu Ming looked at Fu Qian. "Does Mr. Fu also think that limb attachment is an evil practice?" For a question that could fuel hundreds of debates, it's hard to have a definitive answer. Fu Qian shook his head. "As far as I'm concerned, it's quite an interesting concept, but it doesn't captivate me. I can understand, Mr. Fu's strength is transcendent, and unlike us, you don't need to rely on external objects." Lu Ming nodded in understanding, then after a few seconds of silence, he cast off his cloak, revealing the right hand he'd kept hidden all along. In truth, it could hardly be called a hand anymore, resembling more the head of some crawling creature. There was no palm and fingers, and everything below the elbow was covered with yellowish-brown scales, with a deformed beak at the end, even revealing sharp teeth within. Lu Ming extended his arm, aiming at the rippling water surfaces. The next moment, with a strange chirping sound, a sickly green flame erupted, forming a spectacular fan of fire that covered a large area. After a few seconds, the spray ceased, and the residual flames floated on the water, enduring like will-o'-the-wisps. Indeed, he was a leader. This display seemed far stronger than Ji Ping's abilities. Fu Qian silently made his assessment. At this time, after showing off his ability, Lu Ming let out a long sigh. People are born different, and in this world, especially so. Some are born with cultivation talents, others awaken special abilities as they grow, and the rest lead an utterly mediocre life. In comparison, I think the existence of limb attachment provides a more fair opportunity than bloodline or fate could ever offer. The small boat swiftly approached Central Island, and Lu Ming disembarked first, with Fu Qian and the boatman following. The three of them quickly went past the White Tower until they reached a circular building. This place had just been introduced the day before, the legendary limb attachment laboratory, the site of rebirth coveted by many. Even at night, the place was brightly lit and bustling. Lu Ming led the way unimpeded through security doors, all the way to the depths of the laboratory. This was a huge underground space, lined with transparent boxes of various sizes from top to bottom, looking like an underground museum. Except the items displayed were rather horrifying. Sundered hands, eyeballs, tails, wings, a dazzling array of bizarre and peculiar body parts. This is the laboratory's material storage. Lu Ming stood in front, arms spread wide. With our efforts, each item stored here will ultimately find its true owner. I get your point. Seeing his enraptured state, Fu Qian casually concurred. To the deserving go the spoils of fate, the original owners of these parts were merely the soil that nurtured them. Well said. Lu Ming looked at Fu Qian with a face full of admiration. Heroes think alike. This has nothing to do with seeing the same thing, I'm just deducing based on your overbearing logic. Do you know what is the most idiotic rule? Fu Qian's reply, however, piqued Lu Ming's interest, prompting him to raise another question. The upper limit on limb attachment. Fu Qian thought for a moment before answering. The limb attachment advocate in front of him must despise that deeply. Exactly. Lu Ming's face showed disgust. Rigid and stupid, it does nothing but shackle a great invention. Sometimes they do handle things in a rather inflexible manner. Fu Qian recalled his previous encounters with the night watchman. Actually, the main reason I asked Mr. Fu here today is for another matter. Seeing that Fu Qian had little interest in these matters, Lu Ming didn't digress any further and continued further inside, opening a uniquely designed box. Please look at this. This. The content inside made Fu Qian frown. It was a number of tentacles entangled together, varying in length, all bathed in a ghostly blue hue, still slowly writhing and emitting an indescribable odor. We discovered this while collecting transcendent limbs. After many experiments, and not just one person being devoured by it, we unanimously believe that only a transcendent with formidable strength can possibly control it. You must understand, the more powerful the limb, the higher the requirement for the recipient, otherwise. The best case scenario is ineffectiveness, and the worst, not being able to withstand the backlash. From its current performance, we believe that if someone successfully merges with this, it could elevate a transcendent to a demigod. Would Mr. Fu be interested? Sounds like there's quite a bit of uncertainty. Fu Qian glanced at him. To a certain extent, yes, but high risk, high reward, right? Lu Ming stared at Fu Qian, the temptation of ascending to demigod status, something he believed no transcendent could resist. High risk, high reward, is that what you told those volunteers who died as well? More than that, actually. Every single one. Lu Ming waved to someone behind him. We make it clear to all who undergo limb attachment, that everything comes at a price. Without that understanding, they shouldn't even dream of transcendent power. The ferryman from before lowered his head and stepped forward, gently pulling up his sleeve to reveal his left arm. A slender arm was neatly amputated below the shoulder, attached to it was a hairless claw, covered in dark red stripes, looking quite ferocious. Wait a second, Fu Qian's attention was caught by something else. He hadn't noticed before, but now he looked at the man's golden short hair. Is your sister called Vale? Fu Qian took out the pendant of the golden-haired woman and compared it with the photo. How do you know? The beast claw girl suddenly looked up, incredulously staring at Fu Qian. Your sister asked me to help deliver this to you. She and your family miss you a lot and hope you come home soon. Fu Qian hung the item over her shoulder, relayed Vale's message, and considered the task done. I don't need you guys to teach me how to live my life. 5 seconds later, the beast claw girl came to her senses, snatched the pendant and fiercely threw it to the ground. Her tone suddenly turned hostile. No matter what you say, I'm not going back. I was just entrusted to deliver something, whether you go back or not doesn't concern me. Your decision doesn't concern me, but this impolite tone of yours. Fu Qian looked at the rebellious girl, his expression a mix of a smile and not a smile. Did my act of delivering this create the false impression that I carry a friendly reputation? The beast claw girl shuddered and quickly realized whom she was talking to, her face instantly turned pale. Chapter 91, Chapter 91, Chapter 90, King of the White Tower, Part 12_1. Chapter 91, Chapter 90, King of the White Tower, Part 12_1. It was clear that Fu Qian's brutal behavior over 2 consecutive days had left a deep impression on everyone. As soon as he spoke, not only was the beast claw girl taken aback, but Lu Ming next to her also had a look of rigidity on his face. All these reactions were noticed by Fu Qian, who immediately huffed in disdain. The local guilds really lacked manners. The one rowing for him happened to be the younger sister of the blonde woman. Fu Qian didn't believe in such coincidences. The most likely explanation was that the Rebirth Club really had long arms, monitoring his residence and keeping an eye on every movement of Vale's comings and goings. So, they used her sister to test the waters, arranging this coincidence. On one hand, it served as a gesture of goodwill, on the other, it was to see if they could exert some control over him. As for Vale's sister, she seemed not to be the sharpest tool in the shed and likely had no idea about any of this, having been summoned in a daze. She might have even been sold on some grand promises before leaving, like the company was planning to groom her for a key role or something. There's no cure for stupidity, one might say. At this moment, the Beast Claw girl's complexion turned pale, and although she opened her mouth several times, no sounds came out. Fu Qian didn't bother with her and, after another huff, turned to give Lu Ming a glance. As someone who had just torn a giant beast apart with his bare hands, it would be rather weak-spirited not to react at all to being watched. This glance made Lu Ming's breathing tighten, and goosebumps sprang up all over his body. The intention of bringing Vale's sister here had been to discreetly curry favor. It backfired spectacularly. It was evident to Fu Qian that he was being watched, and he was understandably displeased. The previously harmonious atmosphere had vanished without a trace. Given his propensity for resorting to violence at the drop of a hat, predicting his next move was difficult. At this moment, Lu Ming truly regretted this misguided attempt at probing. Fu Qian stared intently for a while, until Lu Ming's body tensed up, his right hand trembled, and he was on the verge of snapping. All of a sudden, Fu Qian nonchalantly turned away and resumed examining the tentacles inside the box. Lu Ming silently let out a breath and glanced at the Beast Claw girl. In just under half a minute, she seemed almost unable to stand, her face completely drained of color. "You should leave first," Lu Ming said in a low voice, shooing her out. The Beast Claw girl, feeling as if she had received a pardon, turned and left. A few steps later, remembering something, she bent down to pick up the pendant that had dropped on the floor, clutching it in her hand as she hurried out the door. "Elder Lu, I have a question." No sooner had the Beast Claw girl left than Fu Qian greeted Lu Ming without any sign of the recent tension, as if nothing had happened. "You just said that the club could help me integrate this thing." Lu Ming was startled, thinking Fu Qian would come seeking retribution, but instead, the topic suddenly reverted to the previous one. Lu Ming took a deep breath and nodded earnestly. "Yes, we've already begun to grasp some of its characteristics. If Mr. Fu is interested, we will certainly provide our full cooperation. Given your strength, as long as you can integrate it, the probability of ascending to demigod status is quite high. There will certainly be a place for you among the islands." "Is that so?" After Lu Ming finished speaking, Fu Qian turned back to look at him. "Are you not on good terms with demigod Ibu? No wonder I had a conflict with that demigod earlier, and then you came to see me in the evening. Can you tell me, what kind of conflict do you have with each other?" "This." Lu Ming took a breath and gave a slight nod. "Mr. Fu has a keen eye, so I have nothing to hide. Our relationship with Ibu is indeed not very smooth. At first, we assisted Bai Jinting in establishing the islands. The laboratory is essentially the foundation for the island's development. You could say that without the club's assistance, this place wouldn't exist at all. It sounds like a time of great trials and tribulations." Fu Qian blinked. "I suppose there were many sacrifices made during the exploratory process. If someone else asked me, I would definitely deny it, but honest people should be sincere with one another. I can only say that for some great advancements, the sacrifice of the ignorant masses is worthwhile. This is also their honor. Does Bai Jinting know about this?" "Of course, he provided us with a considerable amount of base material at the beginning." "Understood, please continue." Fu Qian nodded in satisfaction. As the foundation of the island's establishment, the club and the laboratory originally held a position above all, and everything developed very smoothly. Unfortunately, since Ibu came here, we've been targeted at every turn. He doesn't like these things. Fu Qian gestured around him. Describing it as viewing them as enemies would be more apparent. Lu Ming scoffed. This kind of demigod, who ascended through lineage and a bit of effort, can't stand limb attachment, calling it heresy. The key is by Jinting's unusual trust in him. We've been increasingly hamstrung over these 5 years. The once envied Rebirth Club has now become something to be shunned. Actually, that's somewhat understandable. Fu Qian pointed to the tentacles in the box. Even I find this stuff to be pretty creepy. New things always need to be gradually accepted. Lu Ming's expression turned somewhat awkward. Makes sense. Fu Qian nodded. Can I touch and see? Lu Ming looked surprised. Your train of thought really leaps wildly. Fusion requires a lot of preliminary testing and preparation. It doesn't matter, I just want to look. All right. After obtaining Lu Ming's consent, Fu Qian extended a finger and reached into the box. The twisting, writhing tentacle seemed to sense something and suddenly stopped. The next moment, the tip of the tentacle curled up slightly and slowly approached Fu Qian's finger. This thing has much higher activity compared to other limbs. As Fu Qian moved, Lu Ming explained in a grave tone beside him. Before his words were complete, the tentacle had already climbed onto Fu Qian's finger. A cold, slimy sensation was transmitted, and where the tentacle touched, the skin seemed to be painted with a layer of water-blue fluorescence. Just as the tentacle crawled across the palm, seeking to spread towards the wrist, Fu Qian suddenly withdrew his hand. He turned back to look at a puzzled Lu Ming. Let's leave it there for today. Declining Lu Ming's offer to send him back, Fu Qian took a boat they provided and headed back, swaying leisurely. Once Lu Ming's figure disappeared from his view, Fu Qian unfolded his right hand. Under the moonlight, star-like points of blue fluorescence covered most of his palm, resembling a galaxy. This was where the thing had crawled. At this moment, it felt like countless tiny insects were trying to burrow into his flesh. He brought it close to his nose to smell. Furthermore, that distinctive odor had also been transferred. One had to admit Lu Ming and his colleagues had good taste. This thing truly was a bit miraculous, not as simple as an ordinary transcendent creature. Almost simultaneously, Fu Qian's sensation of being surveilled flashed and then vanished. He's definitely here. Fu Qian did not look back towards Central Island, but he was 90% sure that the demigod Ibu was observing him from somewhere. It was just speculation at first, until just now when the traces of touch caused a slight emotional fluctuation in that individual, briefly revealing his presence. This demigod hated limb attachment to the core. He must have been monitoring his interaction with Lu Ming the entire time. This way was best, otherwise, touching that thing earlier would have been in vain. Chapter 92, Chapter 92, Chapter 91, King of the White Tower, Part 13_1. Chapter 92, Chapter 91, King of the White Tower, Part 13_1. The competition will start soon, Mr. Fu, we should be heading off. Your hand. By the evening of the next day, the female priestess who came to escort Fu Qian to the arena had her mouth covered in shock once more. Fu Qian followed her gaze and understood why she was surprised. In just one night, the water-blue imprint had spread from his palm to his entire upper arm. The peculiar scent had become even stronger. Not only that, but every place covered by the imprint felt as if countless tiny insects were nibbling away at the flesh. Fortunately, the erosion was not deep, at least for now. It wasn't difficult to deal with this thing, it just required shedding the affected layer of skin. For Fu Qian as he was now, it was nothing short of easy. But he didn't want to do that. The reason was very simple, today was the day of the finals. It would be his first attempt to take down Bai Jinting. The thing would soon come in handy. You shouldn't need to come and fetch me in person, should you? Fu Qian gave the female priestess a glance. Today is the finals. The female priestess forced a smile. If you win the championship, I'll get a bonus too, so I must show some sincerity. So that's the case, I thought you had placed a bet on me. There are indeed bets, but your odds are the lowest. I bet on everyone else, hoping to bring you some luck. Not bad, learning about risk hedging at a young age, you have an unlimited future. As it turned out, Demigod Ibu truly detested limb attachment. Almost the moment he entered the White Tower, Fu Qian could feel this intense aversion. After revealing the mark on his right hand, the hostility surged like a torrent. Yet Fu Qian made no attempt to hide it, adopting a nonchalant demeanor as he headed to the waiting room to rest. After 2 days of fierce battles, only a handful of contestants remained, just one more opponent to take down, and he would enter the final round. This time, no new underhanded tactics emerged, and Fu Qian's number soon appeared on the screen overhead. Standing on the once again rejuvenated field, Fu Qian couldn't help but admire the advantages of wealth. And the contestant opposite him in the ring surprised him for a brief second. Dark ebony armor, a giant sword and shield, a helmet with 2 horns. The opponent in the semi-final was actually that Black Knight from the same preparation room. It had to be said, having made it this far, he must have some skill. His towering figure was extraordinary, and that heavy armor he wore was not something an ordinary person could handle. Fu Qian had seen one of his battles, and it was clear that his combat experience was extremely rich and his style steady and unarrogant. He wielded a giant sword with ferocity, eventually flattening his opponent by 10 centimeters. If there was a weakness, it might be that his realm was too low. Based on the intensity of the aura he displayed, at most he was at the 7th phase, making it hard to imagine how he could wield such a huge shield and sword in that manner. That armor must be no ordinary item. His courage was admirable too. Over the past 2 days, his own notoriety had grown fierce. One would think ordinary opponents, seeing him, might have already despaired. For this knight to stand earnestly in the arena was no small achievement. Once the referee announced the start, the Black Knight began with a silent salute with his sword, then positioned his dark, heavy shield in front of him. This stance suggested he was wary of Fu Qian's killing power, aiming to play defensively and counterattack. It seemed reasonable at first glance, but one shouldn't be so narrow-minded as to label an opponent a strength-based player just because they possess great power. I've always been leaning toward a technique-oriented approach. Confronted with a shell defense, Fu Qian charged forward, dodging an upward slash and then placed his palm on the shield. That's right, he pressed it down. Fu Qian had no intention of blasting both the shield and men to smithereens, instead he gently pressed his hand against it. The Black Knight clearly hadn't expected Fu Qian to act like that and couldn't help but be a little stunned. However, being an experienced warrior, he quickly pulled himself back from his distraction. His first reaction was to retract his shield, swinging out with his sword. But once again he missed. The shield was so exaggeratedly large that Fu Qian was actually hiding behind it, following the shield forward, creating a blind spot for the attack. The shield had become his cover. The Black Knight, cool in the face of danger, pushed the shield out again, but was surprised to find that Fu Qian had disappeared. The next moment, a surging force came from behind him. The Black Knight stumbled nearly 10 meters before stabilizing his form, spewing a mist of blood onto his chest, the dark iron armor stained even more ghastly. Fu Qian, who had taken cover behind the shield to get behind him, had just kicked him in the back. Clang! Realizing the shield was only working against him, the warrior decisively took it off and threw it aside. From the sound of it hitting the ground, it was deceptively heavy. And the now free left hand slowly touched the broad hilt, releasing a murderous intent several times more intense than before. The sound of armor clashing echoed, the Black Knight holding his warhammer, choosing to go on the offensive. The door-sized warhammer came slashing down hard at Fu Qian. That's more like it. A warhammer to the face is a man's true romance. Facing the Black Knight's full form, Fu Qian also raised his right hand. The next moment, countless tentacles burst from his right arm, intertwining into a massive, exotic arm, and hammered fiercely onto the Black Knight's body. Almost instantly, the latter flew backward like a baseball, together with his sword, crashing on the edge of the arena. The helmet fell aside, revealing half a face scorched like a corpse. This is... Amidst the audience's screams, Demigodibu stood up abruptly, his face ashen. At this moment, having defeated his opponent, Fu Qian stepped into the finals, yet he didn't stay to relish the cheers from the crowd and instead left the arena immediately. Song, congratulations. When Fu Qian returned to the preparation room, the female priestess, with a trembling voice, stepped forward to celebrate. Scared by the too brutal scene? Hardly. The fight with the crocodile monster yesterday was far bloodier than this. Fu Qian noticed that she was staring intently at his right hand. That explained it. For quite a few of the female comrades, that last strike was a bit R-rated. But it also depends on who, as there were clearly female shouts from the audience earlier, excited to the point of nearly fainting. Don't be nervous, it'll be over in a moment. Fu Qian patted the female priestess on the shoulder to comfort her, and conveniently chopped her on the neck. How could it be so fast? At this time, the second match had already begun, but Ibu in the stands was frowning deeply. Fu Qian's performance just now was baffling. He thought they had only initially come into contact last night, but it turned out this was clearly a case of initial integration. Could it be they had an understanding all along? These reckless fools, not considering the consequences at all. Fortunately, the level of integration seemed not too high, and he must remain vigilant going forward. Thinking this, Ibu glanced towards Fu Qian's preparation room. The next moment his pupils shrank suddenly. In the resting room, Fu Qian's figure was no longer there. Chapter 93, Chapter 93, Chapter 92, King of the White Tower, Part 14_1. Chapter 93, Chapter 92, King of the White Tower, Part 14_1. Indeed, it still seemed a bit forced to pull off such a stunt right now. Standing at the laboratory's main entrance, Fu Qian could still feel the tearing sensation in his right hand. Just now, forcefully unleashing the biochemical demon arm had placed an even heavier burden on his body than transforming the day before. Fortunately, this time it only lasted a moment, and had not reached the point of losing sanity. Even so, such overdrawn damage was not something that could be solved by simply cutting it off and regrowing it. But as long as it achieved the desired effect, it was worth it. Transforming his arm into a tentacle, Fu Qian indeed did it for the sake of the show, but the intent was not to scare people. This terrifying method of attack, combined with the stains on his arm, should have been enough to mislead Ibu. The next opportunity would come and go in a flash. Open the door, Fu Qian said, looking at the guard coming up to the door. It had to be said that taking on Lu Ming's face was no easy feat, with some details hard to nail down. Fortunately, the guard didn't dare to look too closely and quickly unlocked the door. Following the memories he had, Fu Qian moved swiftly through the laboratory. It was probably due to the competition that there were even fewer people around than when he had come the day before. Since he was not the real Lu Ming, the numerous security doors inside were not so easy to open. Fu Qian had prepared for this, with an air bullet arriving before him at every door. For a time, alarms sounded everywhere he went. Amidst the hustle and bustle, he could confirm that a large number of guards were rushing over. Fu Qian didn't care about that at all and passed through door after door expressionlessly, heading downward. Soon, the dazzling array of material storage appeared before him. Ignoring the plethora of surrounding items, Fu Qian walked straight in, finding the box from the day before. He pulled it open, and the pale blue tentacle reappeared in front of him, even seeming a bit agitated at the sight of Fu Qian. Fu Qian raised his hand, and the marks on his right hand had already spread to his shoulder, seemingly resonating faintly with the tentacle. Fu Qian closed the box again, and before he could make any other move, he suddenly heard the sound of shattering crystal by his ear. Innumerable crystalline icicles rose from the ground, sweeping through the entire room in an instant, and began to grow wildly. In less than 2 seconds, Fu Qian's lower body was encased by a mass of sharp ice spears. To be honest, I am very disappointed. A familiar voice came from behind. Lu Ming, wearing a wide gray robe, walked in. On his right hand, the blasphemous fire was already brewing, with the opened maw aimed in this direction. I thought we were like-minded individuals with a shared vision, but it turns out you have ulterior motives as well. Luckily, I've had them keep a close watch on you the whole time. Where do you plan to take the tentacle? Wouldn't it be better to continue our cooperation according to the plan we discussed? Why can't you wait even a little while longer? You can save that nonsense for the naive kids. Fu Qian retorted, looking back at Lu Ming. I stopped believing in pies falling from the sky when I was in elementary school. Did you really plan to give me a chance to become a demigod? Weren't I just another tester in your plan? Clap clap clap. You're not stupid at all. Lu Ming applauded while making a face of admiration. Indeed, you are a perfect test subject, and also the final step in our experiment. In fact, just now, if you hadn't tried to take the thing away, but merely touched it, we would not have intervened at all, but rather watched to see what would happen. Us. Fu Qian turned around to look at the corner of the warehouse, the place from where the ice crystal had come. There stood an emaciated old man with white hair and beard, his right hand a deformed beak similar to Lu Ming's, only enveloped in a layer of frost. The object on the ground was his doing. Let me guess, he's also a member of the Rebirth Club. Yes, you can call him Kikuchi. After all, I'm not confident about taking you on alone. Lu Ming smiled. Why talk nonsense with him? Kikuchi finally spoke from the corner, his voice neither old nor even a bit effeminate. Aren't you afraid of damaging the thing with this ruckus? Fu Qian glanced at the box. It won't be affected even if you're smashed to pieces. Kikuchi snickered coldly. But I'll try not to turn you into pieces. After all, such good experimental material is rare. Before he finished speaking, a frost-white stream of coldness burst forth from his right hand. At the same time, a sinister green flame attacked from Lu Ming's direction. For a moment, white and green shone together, instantly engulfing Fu Qian's figure. Fu Qian didn't attempt to dodge. The space here was not large, and dodging was pointless in the face of such a wide-range AoE attack. With a crackling sound, Fu Qian's legs forcibly broke free, sliced by sharp ice crystals and drenched in blood. But this brief escape allowed him to charge straight at Lu Ming through the flames without hesitation. Almost instantly, Fu Qian felt the skin on his right hand burn away, the corrosive afterburn even spreading further inside. At the same time, the chill blast from Kikuchi felt like a mountain of ice on his body. Each step he took was incredibly heavy. His countercharge clearly took Lu Ming by surprise, who instinctively tried to dodge backward, not expecting the sharp pain in his abdomen, blood spurting out. Under the cover of ice and fire, the air bullets Fu Qian fired hit Lu Ming. Lu Ming stumbled from the injury, and Fu Qian had already closed in. Once in close combat, Lu Ming stood no chance. Fu Qian didn't hesitate to use the visceral critical strike on his wounded abdomen. Boom. With that strike, Lu Ming's belly wound was further torn open. This was still Fu Qian showing restraint. The indescribable pain blurred Lu Ming's vision. However, before he could react, Fu Qian reached out once more, his hand cradling a vague blue glow. Suddenly, his hollow abdomen felt full, as if something had been stuffed inside. He hadn't even had time to see what it was when the next moment, his neck tightened. Fu Qian grabbed Lu Ming and dragged him towards another target. A crystal-clear ice wall appeared, trying to block Fu Qian's movement, but it shattered before it could fully form. Among the flying ice shards, several air bullets whistled out. Despite Lu Ming's example, the distance was too short and, even with Kikuchi's best effort to dodge, he still got hit in the ribs. Boom. The injured Kikuchi hadn't even managed to regain his balance when he was slammed into the wall by the charging Fu Qian. A crisp sound of breaking bones followed, and he slumped into a heap. All the special effects in the room dissipated at that point. We can talk about this. Looking at the god of death that was Fu Qian, Kikuchi quickly said, barely holding his composure. Although we plan to use you for experiments, the fusion idea is real. If you cooperate, combined with our previous test results, we really can make you a demigod. Unfortunately for him, Fu Qian's response was to throw Lu Ming at him. Dodging just enough to avoid the vitals, Kikuchi wanted to say more but suddenly noticed something writhing like a snake in Lu Ming's abdominal cavity. Chapter 94, Chapter 94, Chapter 93, King of the White Tower, Part 15_1. Chapter 94, Chapter 93, King of the White Tower, Part 15_1. This. Kikuchi's face drained of color in an instant, and he instinctively looked back. The box containing the tentacles was, unbeknownst to him, open, and it was now completely empty. You stuffed it into Lu Ming's belly. Are you insane? What on earth are you trying to do? However, before he could express his shock, he felt a pain beneath his ribs. A tentacle had unexpectedly emerged from Lu Ming's belly and burrowed into his own wound. Agony engulfed him, and Kikuchi tried instinctively to push Lu Ming away, only to find himself powerless to do so. This should do it. Fu Qian watched the two people on the ground with an expressionless face. More and more pale blue tentacles pierced through the two men, completely entangling them together. Their bodies rapidly deformed and rotted, collapsing into an indistinct mass in the blink of an eye. That particular scent became progressively stronger. Fu Qian observed while simultaneously timing the process. He himself was covered in wounds and burns, but none were serious, and under the effect of Tyrant's Fist, they were rapidly healing. About 50 seconds later, Fu Qian moved swiftly as a tentacle shot out like a cannonball, striking where he had just been standing. In a certain sense. I really should thank you. Upon the constantly writhing body, Lu Ming's head opened its eyes and began to speak, gasping for air. The fusion is extremely dangerous, but the rewards are simply too great. I had been hesitant, but today you made the decision for me. Fortunately, I had already accumulated considerable experience in previous tests and knew some methods to handle the situation. As repayment, I've decided to let you experience 100 times the pain I'm undergoing now. You talk too much. Before Lu Ming could finish, another rough voice interrupted him. Kikuchi's head appeared on the other side of the mass of flesh. Hurry up and deal with him, we need to figure out how to separate our bodies quickly. You don't need to rush me. Lu Ming snorted, and the next moment, a mass of tentacles sprayed out, like a dozen blue bolts of lightning. Fu Qian narrowly dodged them, and the solid metal wall was smashed into a large crater. It seems like you two are getting along quite well, Fu Qian said with a smile, looking at the symmetrical heads. Why would you want to separate? As he spoke, he flicked his wrist, and a scarlet whip materialized out of nowhere, striking the body shared by the two men. Boom. Lu Ming, about to speak, felt as if a grenade had gone off inside his head. Thoughts and emotions flew chaotically, and his reason tottered on the brink. Something's not right, kill him now. Kill him now. Kikuchi's shrill scream came through, followed by another mass of tentacles lashing out. Fu Qian deftly evaded them, and several more whips struck out in response. Leveraging the power of Tyrant's Fist, he rapidly broke down the sanity of the two men. No. The duo of Lu Ju only felt their minds plunge further into chaos, and they couldn't help but scream together, as countless large and small tentacles thrashed about, attempting to grasp Fu Qian. However, such blind attacks posed no threat. Fu Qian moved as if strolling through a leisurely garden amidst the tempest, dodging while relentlessly lashing out with the whip. Crash! Fragments flew in all directions as a box containing a large compound was broken, and its contents tumbled out onto the floor. Under the deliberate guidance of Fu Qian, the three had retreated to the material storehouse outside. Crash! More boxes were smashed by the tentacles, scattering years of accumulated research throughout the lab. All the items that fell out, upon touching the chaotic bodies of Lu Ju, rapidly merged into them. In the blink of an eye, the two became a meatball with hundreds of eyes, countless pairs of mismatched limbs, wings, and tentacles flailing. Roar! The two completely descended into madness, blindly lashing out everywhere, only bestial roars remaining where their heads were. That's enough. Fu Qian didn't linger, he turned around and ran back the way he came, bursting out without any obstruction. Now that Lu Ju had successfully transformed, there was no force left in the lab to stop him, the ordinary guards couldn't even keep up with his speed. By this time, the lab's alarms were blaring continuously. Lu Ju had already burst above ground and were rampaging, wildly destroying everything around them. Countless guards and researchers fled in all directions. Should be about time, right? Fu Qian hid to one side, his hand trembling, skin peeling off, the marks left by the tentacles fading, his scent vanishing completely. Having done all this, he minimized his presence to the greatest extent and looked towards the direction of the White Tower. Half a minute later, a terrifying murderous intent seeped out from the White Tower. It felt as if a fearsome thunderstorm was rushing over. Ibu couldn't sit still any longer. A flash of lightning landed in front of the lab, the red-haired, black-robed Ibu appeared, staring intently at the tentacles whipping around. The noise Lu Ming and the others made was too great, almost instantly drawing the demigod's attention. Now's the time. Fu Qian rushed towards the White Tower without hesitating. Because of his performance earlier, Ibu was sure to think that the meatball was him. This would buy him a little bit of time. Enough. The finale that the audience has been waiting for is about to start. Please welcome the fighters to the stage. Just as Fu Qian arrived at the prep room, he heard the announcer's excited voice. The female priestess was still unconscious but breathing steadily. Indeed, it was time to enter the stage. Fu Qian took a deep breath and stepped into the blinding spotlight. However, amid the crowd's frenzied screams, he didn't head towards the duel arena but instead leapt straight up on the spot. At the highest point, he extended his arms swiftly, embedding them deeply into the wall, borrowing strength from the wall. He leapt again, rushing towards Bai Jinting's stand in the White Tower. Alarms went off almost immediately, followed by strong gusts and flames, attempting to stop Fu Qian's approach. As the king of the White Tower, Bai Jinting would not be protected by Ibu alone. Yet such attacks were hardly a threat compared to a demigod. Fu Qian's body flickered swiftly, easily dodging the attempts to stop him. Finally, with a fierce leap, he jumped onto the stand where Bai Jinting was located. This was his first close encounter with his target. From a distance, an angry roar could be heard, a fierce lightning bolt racing towards the White Tower. Truly a demigod, he had noticed even faster than expected. Bai Jinting on the stand showed little panic, just watching Fu Qian with a stern face. Why? Fu Qian didn't answer, he just stomped down hard. As flesh and blood flew, the scene in front of him twisted. Yet there was no indication of success or failure. The finale that the audience has been waiting for is about to start. Please welcome the fighters to the stage. As his senses returned, Fu Qian found himself back in the prep room, the announcer's voice excitedly blaring outside again. The only difference was that the female priestess lying next to him was now breathing rapidly in her slumber. Chapter 95, Chapter 95, Chapter 94, King of the White Tower, 16_1. Chapter 95, Chapter 94, King of the White Tower, 16_1. This was truly a first for me. Fu Qian looked around and couldn't help but frown. A containment failure meant just going back to the warehouse to start over. But the current situation. Fu Qian lifted his head to look at Bai Jinting's position. He had been crushed to pieces under Fu Qian's own feet, yet now, he was sitting there, intact. This was a complete reset, wasn't it? Could it be that we have to repeat what just happened? No, that's not right. Something had changed. For one, the host's voice was different, as if tinged with an inexplicable madness. And if you listened carefully, the audience's cheering had turned almost into the howling of wild beasts. And there was her. Fu Qian looked down at the female priestess, her breathing was becoming more and more hurried, and she even made unintelligible strange noises in her throat. Something was off. Without any hesitation, Fu Qian extended his hand and knocked on the back of her head. The female priestess shuddered, took a deep breath, and sat up sharply. How do you feel? Fu Qian, observing her reddened eyes, became even more certain of his judgment. I feel so uncomfortable. The female priestess's facial features contorted as she was trying to regain her senses, and she couldn't help but clutch her head tightly. At the same time, her other hand was scratching the table incessantly, producing a grating sound. But being made of flesh and blood, her nails soon splintered, and blood flowed vividly. Where does it hurt? Everywhere hurts. How does it hurt? Extremely, uncomfortable. You should sleep some more. Fu Qian shook his head and struck her neck. She stopped struggling and slumped back down with a clang. Not only was her mind not sharp, but there was also something wrong with her spirit. It was impossible to get any valuable information out of her. Fu Qian turned around, ignoring the deafening roar from outside, and left the preparation room in the opposite direction. He had been crushed to pieces under his feet, yet now he was sitting there enjoying the chaos again. There had to be a problem somewhere. As expected, something had gone wrong. Leaving the White Tower, Fu Qian looked at the world outside. It was still night, but completely different from before. A huge, peerless blood-red moon hung overhead. It felt so near that it seemed like it could fall down at any moment. This seems familiar. Fu Qian recalled the full moon garden where he encountered the werewolf. It was comparable in size to that moon, only a different color. At this moment, Central Island was shrouded in a gray-white mist. With the omnipresent crimson moonlight adding to the setting, the surroundings were dyed like a demon realm. Boom. Before Fu Qian had a chance to observe closely, a loud noise came from the distance. Right above the laboratory, a huge thundercloud appeared. Innumerable silver-white electric snakes struck down from it, lighting up the surroundings as if it were daylight. Coupled with the deafening thunder, it radiated an apocalyptic aura. And within this lightning jungle, a giant creature swayed its tentacles, resisting the repeated strikes. Couldn't be, could it? Fu Qian looked at the figure, which he faintly remembered, yet its form was somewhat different now. Logically speaking, it should be Lu Ju and the others, but this one's head had swelled up too much, likely more than tenfold. No wonder it had forced Demigod Ibu to unleash his powers. The terrifying lightning storm, such as the demigods might. Before Fu Qian could finish his thoughts, a figure flew out in the chaos, their body sparking with electricity, barely stabilizing after considerable effort. Who else could it be but Demigod Ibu? This monster can't even defeat a demigod now. By its appearance, this thing somewhat resembles a seahorse with a head full of tentacles. The majority of its body sprawls across the building, causing the entire laboratory to wobble as if on the verge of collapse. On the surface of the monster's body, densely packed, sprouted hundreds of heads, all of which were closed-eyed, emitting sharp cries at the moment. Fu Qian could roughly guess how it grew to such a gigantic size. It's likely that it has devoured all the people from the laboratory. Fu Qian quickly scanned these heads and, indeed, spotted a certain head with golden short hair. Beast Claw Girl. This rebellious young lady was unlucky and had become part of this enormous creature. However, to look on the bright side, at least her head was located on the top rather than the bottom. It wasn't the worst-case scenario. In the continually collapsing lab, people occasionally ran out, shrieking. And those who got caught by the monster's tentacles were rapidly absorbed into its body, becoming a part of it. The next moment, a dazzling ball of electric energy appeared, comparable to a sun's eruption, which then started to expand wildly. Demigod Ibu did not choose to leave. Soon after reaching its limit, the swelling electric ball shot forth, and the monster began to thrash wildly, sparks flickering all over its body. This one truly had a fiery temper, yet the monster's vitality was terrifyingly tenacious. After struggling for barely half a minute, it rose again from the ground. It seemed these two wouldn't be finishing anytime soon. Fu Qian turned and left. Approaching them now would definitely not be wise. Given old Master Ibu's temperament, explanations would probably be useless, and there was a high likelihood of getting dragged into the fray. It would be better to check out other places. As expected, this place had also fallen. Fu Qian narrowed his eyes at the street before him. An empty street was understandable, but what about the fresh bloodstains on the wall? Just as he was contemplating following the bloodstains, several figures chased each other in haste from the distance. What are you doing here? The one running in the lead was Veil with rapiers in both hands. Her white combat suit was already spattered with blood. Seeing Fu Qian, she hesitated. Shouldn't you be in the contest? The atmosphere was too intense, so I stepped out for a break. Fu Qian casually responded, gesturing towards her chasers. What's going on here? I have no idea. Veil said between breaths, shaking her head. I was hoping to take advantage of the final contest when the guards were sparse to sneak in and look for my sister. It was going well until a while ago when I was spotted for some reason, and then these guards began chasing after me as if possessed. Are you sure they're not actually possessed? By this time, Veil's pursuers had closed in. Fu Qian let loose a series of air bullets, knocking down several people, then crouched to examine them closely. Not only were the eyes of the one in the lead blood red, but his entire body was also covered in black feathers. And even after falling, his ferocity remained unchanged, even attempting to bite. Was this some kind of beast transformation? The influence of a transcendent limb? Fu Qian then carefully checked the other people. He found that, without exception, all had undergone mutations, especially apparent near the attached limbs. What in the world is going on? At that moment, Veil finally realized something was amiss, her voice trembling as she spoke. When did they discover you? Just a few minutes ago, almost around the time when those flashes of lightning occurred over there. Veil pointed in the direction of Central Island. Did something go wrong with the contest? And what's with that monster? A few minutes earlier, that would have coincided with the time he showed up in the preparation room. Could the anomalies on the island indeed be related to his killing of Bai Jinting? Where were you planning to go originally? Fu Qian thought for a moment before asking. To the Rebirth Club. Chapter 96, Chapter 96, Chapter 95, King of the White Tower, 17_1. Chapter 96, Chapter 95, King of the White Tower, 17_1. Rebirth Club. So you know quite a lot about your sister, guessing she would get mixed up with that crowd. Fu Qian glanced at Veil and gave her a thumbs up. Of course, Fu Qian didn't tell her that the sister she was longing for had already become a part of that monster. I know the place well, follow me. Fu Qian gestured with his hand for her to keep up. Following the route in his memory, he led Veil quickly to the bar of the Rebirth Club. Under the moonlight, the bouncer with 3 arms at the door had turned into an animal walking on 5 legs. The moment he saw Fu Qian and his companion, the creature growled and pounced with all its limbs. It's a pity that before it even touched the ground, it met an air bullet head-on and was sent flying backward. The place where it had just been crouching was occupied by 2 bodies, gnawed beyond recognition. The sight turned Vale's face deathly pale. This is it. Fu Qian didn't hesitate and pushed the door open to enter. Whoosh! Almost instantly, a streak of cold light flew towards him. Fu Qian reached out with his right hand and once again caught a spear between 2 fingers. The next instant, a heart-wrenching roar echoed from inside the building, and a dark shadow charged at him. Fu Qian easily dodged to the side and got a clear look at the attacker. Although he had seen his fair share of sights, the creature before him still astounded him. A monster with a huge, top-heavy body had over 20 limbs like those of a sea urchin stretching in all directions, with several heads interspersed among them. The entity was supported at the bottom by a slender quadruped horse's body. Judging by the number of limbs, it seemed that several of the people he had seen before were now part of it. Fu Qian sighed, quickly spotting a gray-white eyeball on one of the hands. That eyeball was already focused on him. Whoosh! Whoosh! The feeling of fading lasted less than half a second. Fu Qian didn't give it a chance to continue casting illusions, launching air bullet after air bullet at the sea urchin body, causing limbs to fly chaotically. Eventually, the sea urchin couldn't hold on any longer and crashed to the ground. Relief-like moans arose, as if 5 or 6 people were groaning at the same time. What in the world? Vale, who had witnessed all this, only got halfway through her sentence before she covered her mouth and ran off to the side to vomit. This is the rebirth club you were looking for. After she had vomited enough, Fu Qian said. But it doesn't look like they can answer your questions anymore. Phew. Vale, returning from vomiting, was not as fragile as imagined. She forcibly suppressed her nausea and walked forward, identifying deformed heads one by one. After confirming Jenny's brown hair through the bloodied mess, it was evident that she let out a sigh of relief. At the same time, she couldn't help it anymore and covered her mouth as she rushed back out. This one seemed to be handling it quite normally. Is it true that those who have gone through limb attachment are more heavily affected? Being a transcendent with original limbs, Vale must be among those least affected. I've already given your sister the pendant. I suggest you find a place to hide for now. Fu Qian said to Vale on the side. Without waiting for her reaction, he pushed the door open and flew rapidly towards Central Island. The thunder was dying down, it was time to finish it off. When Fu Qian arrived, Old Master Ibu was drawing back the thunderbolt bow, with electricity converging on the bowstring. The next instant, the only tentacle of the monster still moving was cleanly severed into 2 pieces, toppling to the ground lifeless. And Ibu, after releasing this shot, grew dim with electricity, revealing a weary state. In front of him, the entire laboratory had been reduced to ruins. Ah, still a step too late. Fu Qian let out a long sigh and stepped forward. You are not. The moment he saw Fu Qian, Ibu was obviously taken aback. He instinctively looked at the monster's corpse, then turned back to look at Fu Qian, his face filled with doubt about his life. Indeed, he had always thought that monster was me. From a certain perspective, Old Master Ibu was quite straightforward. I guess there would be trouble here at the lab, so as soon as I dealt with the hidden dangers on me, I rushed over, but it seems I'm still a step late. Fu Qian sighed as he raised his arm, revealing his arm that had fully recovered. Did you just go to deal with the contamination on you? Ibu stared coldly at Fu Qian, his face showing suspicion. Impressive. Even though the other party was in poor condition after the battle, being scrutinized by that sharp gaze made Fu Qian feel as if he had nowhere to hide. As expected of the demigod of legend. Correct. Fu Qian nodded. Yesterday, Lu Ming led me here, purposely making me touch a strange tentacle. I felt something was wrong at that moment, and almost couldn't suppress it during the competition. But I've just found a place to deal with it, and now I'm fine. What's happened here? And what's with the moon in the sky? This. I'm not sure either. After staring at Fu Qian for a long time, Ibu finally turned his head, shifting his gaze back to the giant monster's corpse. I originally thought. Anyway, I sensed this thing and rushed over quickly, and then the blood moon appeared in the sky. I thought the anomaly in the sky was caused by this monster, but now I'm very certain that it's dead, and the blood moon is still not dispelled. Ibu shook his head. Very strange, I can't figure it out. As I thought, even the demigod did not realize he had been reset. Before killing Baijinting, he had clearly found out about himself and turned back. But now his memory was stuck at the time when he was dealing with this monster. A method even a demigod can't immunize against. Indeed peculiar. I'll go take a look at the White Tower side, Fu Qian said, and without waiting for a reply, he rushed toward the direction of the White Tower. Ibu was greatly weakened and had lost the ability to stop him. This also spared me from having to deal the final blow. Of course, had he tried to stop me, I would have had no choice but to claim his head. Now that it's confirmed the monster is unrelated to the Blood Moon, it's still the one who tied the bell who can untie it, so it might be worthwhile to have a chat with Baijinting. Once inside the White Tower again, it had turned into a hellish carnival. In the stands, all kinds of demons and monsters were hopping up and down, all undergoing bestial transformation. Sea urchin-like fusions were wreaking havoc all around, devouring targets or being devoured by larger fusions. Kicking away a monster lunging at him, Fu Qian didn't hesitate, repeated his previous tactics, and leapt toward the direction of the stands. This time he faced more obstacles. The mutated audience members became extremely aggressive, and almost every step he took, various monsters would lunge at him, while Fu Qian dodged and ascended using various movements. It was like playing some kind of ancient level-busting game. Eventually, after breaking through multiple obstructions, Fu Qian once again leapt onto Baijinting's stand. On the stand, only Baijinting was there, delightfully watching the hellish scene. His expression sunk again when he saw Fu Qian. Why? Guess. This time Fu Qian did not rush to take action but instead dragged a chair over and sat down. Ah, I know. Baijinting first appeared contemplative, then suddenly exclaimed, his face showing an epiphany. You've come to kill me again. Chapter 97, Chapter 97, Chapter 96, King of the White Tower, 18_1. Chapter 97, Chapter 96, King of the White Tower, 18_1. No rush, we have all the time in the world. Baijinting, whose words startled, neither called for backup nor attempted to escape, but instead stood up and walked to the edge of the stands. This place has the best view in the entire White Tower. With his back to Fu Qian, he seemed completely unconcerned about his own life, raising his hand to point down below. Want to take a look? Even in the islands, such a spectacle is rare. Indeed, I have already experienced this enthusiasm just a moment ago. In the face of his abnormal behavior, Fu Qian also wasn't in a hurry to act, truly standing up and walking to the edge of the stands, his demeanor like that of old friends chatting leisurely. It had to be said that this angle indeed offered an excellent view, with the entire situation inside the White Tower visible at a glance. In just this short time, the scene below had grown even more chaotic and bloody. Paired with the strange structure of the building itself, it was almost a hellish composition. How does it feel? Asked Baijinting. Full of life. Fu Qian's response clearly took Baijinting aback, then he couldn't help but burst into loud laughter. Well said. This scene can indeed be called the ultimate display of the vitality of life. In a way, this is also the original intent behind establishing the islands. Wasn't your original intent in establishing the islands to play the game of human modification? Seeing how eager he was to express himself, Fu Qian decisively decided to find out more information. That's just the goal of some people, it's only a means to me. When you speak of some people, do you mean the Rebirth Club? Exactly. I've heard you've had quite a few encounters with them lately. Did they tell you about their plan to attach a special limb to me, thus granting me eternal life? No, but eternal life is indeed a tremendous temptation for an ordinary person. Exactly, I was already not young at that time, and the fear of death was unavoidable. In fact, I quickly agreed to them, and then came the plan for these islands. At that time, their technology was not mature enough, so I spent a great deal of manpower and material resources to build the laboratory outside for them. And to attract more people here, I turned this place into a paradise of decadence, a land of no prohibitions through various means. Every person who enters the islands is easily awakened to the restlessness deep in their hearts, thus providing a continuous supply of test subjects. So that's how it is. The origin of these islands is not surprising to me. In fact, I have also perused your White Tower Codex. Fu Qian thought to himself. You mentioned once just now, it seems you ultimately did not accept the transformation, did you? Remembering Lu Ming's grudge against Bai Jinting, their relationship obviously became tense later on. Yes. I did not accept in the end. Do you know why? Bai Jinting asked, looking forward with a questioning tone. Why, when everything seemed mature, did you stop at the last moment? Based on my life experience. Fu Qian said, adopting the stance of someone who has been through it all. Human ability to resist temptation is very poor. Most of the time, the only thing that can make a person reject a temptation is a greater temptation. Is it that, in this process, you had already obtained what you wanted? You're indeed a smart man. Bai Jinting looked at Fu Qian with an appreciative face. Much better than those old gents from the Rebirth Club. Up until now, they still don't understand why I refuse to cooperate, even resorting to a lot of little tricks to test me. Bai Jinting sniffed disdainfully. It was all about mutual exploitation to begin with. They had already lost their greatest value to me. And then you found demigod Ibu. Correct, I couldn't directly drive them away, so I paid a heavy price to invite Ibu here and gave him a substantial share of power. He did not disappoint me, helping me solve many troubles. As for the ridiculous title of demigod, Bai Jinting let out a burst of cold laughter. Mortals possess such impoverished imagination that a person capable of summoning the wind and rain dares to claim the title of divine. The reason I rejected Lu Ming and their suggestions is because. He spread his arms wide, embracing the sky. One day, I touched upon an incredible, great existence. It allowed me to see the true nature of the world, as well as the crudeness of the so-called transcendent powers. This brimming charlatan's demeanor. Watching Bai Jinting grow increasingly immersed in his act, Fu Qian courteously did not interrupt him. The true divine beings are completely devoid of all those mundane emotions of joy, anger, sorrow, and delight. They wouldn't even care about your purpose, it is merely your actions that draw their attention, and a response is given offhandedly. And on that day, standing atop the White Tower, I was observed by it and received its protection. Now do you understand why I said, again? Bai Jinting looked at Fu Qian. Because I clearly recall that, not long ago, you charged at me just like now and crushed me to smithereens. However, it's a shame that here, you will never be able to kill me. It's best to be modest in life. The last one who said these words to me ended up as a headless corpse. Fu Qian commented while analyzing. You used the phrase, in here. It seems that although identical, this place might not be the original archipelago. What could it be? Illusions, dreams? Why couldn't it have been the dream at first, and now the reality after waking up? Bai Jinting wore a mocking expression. It's not impossible, but I just ran a small test. Fu Qian extended a middle finger. This is a gadget that can pull people into dreams. A minute ago I tried it out, and before the dream could spread, it popped like a soap bubble. It was unusual, so if I had to guess, I'd say we are currently in the dream. Ha ha. Bai Jinting was momentarily stunned, then burst into hearty laughter. You guessed it right, this is indeed a special dreamscape. Your action of killing me just now drew the entire archipelago into this place. As I said earlier, I will not die here. Every attempt at killing me will bring you back to that moment. Not only can you not kill me, you cannot even escape. You now have two choices. One is to try killing me, to confirm whether I am lying, or following the traditional experience, you can attempt to leave the dreamscape through suicide, but I cannot guarantee its effectiveness. I said it right at the beginning, you have all the time in the world, you can think for a while longer, no need to rush your decision. It won't take that long. Looking at the smug king of the White Tower, Fu Qian shook his head. I had already made up my mind the moment you said, again. Fu Qian's fingers moved rapidly, and air bullets whistled out. So you chose the most brainless approach, huh? Bai Jinting let out a contemptuous sneer, only to be shattered into pieces once again. Chapter 98, Chapter 98, Chapter 97, King of the White Tower, 19_1. Chapter 98, Chapter 97, King of the White Tower, 19_1. With Bai Jinting's death once again, a sensation similar to waking up from a dream arose. The highly anticipated finals are about to begin. Fighters, please enter the arena. However, as Fu Qian's consciousness was restored, the first thing he heard was still the host's excited voice. Indeed, back again. It had felt like waking from a dream just moments ago. Was this moving from one dream to another? Endless nightmare mode, huh? Bai Jinting's mocking voice seemed to still linger in his ears. But Fu Qian was indifferent, heading straight out the door. Leaping, climbing, dodging, until he was once again atop the stand where Bai Jinting was. Proves I wasn't lying, doesn't it? Bai Jinting winked at Fu Qian, his tone dripping with heavy sarcasm. However, his eye only half closed when the air bullet blasted him into the sky. 2. Fu Qian counted, experiencing the sensation of a dream being pulled away again, as the familiar voice echoed in his ears. The highly anticipated finals are about to begin. Fighters, please enter the arena. Opening doors, leaping, climbing, evading. After completing this sequence for the third time, Fu Qian once again faced Bai Jinting. This time, the latter shook his head and sighed, his expression full of pity for the mentally challenged. What you're doing is meaningless. 3. Fu Qian didn't respond, he just counted again, and Bai Jinting was shattered to pieces once more. Have you completely lost your mind to slaughter? 4. Futile struggle. 5. You're completely in vain, changing nothing. 6. Have you completely given up on yourself? 7. Fu Qian tirelessly exited the preparation room again and again, repeating the same sequence of actions, killing Bai Jinting in various ways. And at last, the latter's demeanor began to change. From the initial mockery to speechless choking up. When the kill count reached 40, Bai Jinting finally broke down. As Fu Qian advanced for another kill, Bai Jinting tried to escape elsewhere. But against Fu Qian, who could complete the kill with his eyes closed after loading dozens of times, there was simply no escape. What exactly are you trying to do? Before being reduced to dust again, Bai Jinting looked at Fu Qian with a desperate gaze. I told you just now, the moment you said again, I had already made up my mind. If everything is an identical repetition, then this nightmare is truly unsolvable. Fu Qian smiled at him. But it's different with you as the audience. As long as you remember each death, what I'm doing isn't a meaningless repetition. From what I know, many people lack patience to the extent that they love to abuse words like countless and forever. In fact, you'll find it's often used to describe a quantity that doesn't even reach triple digits. So I have to wonder whether the protection you have can really withstand countless deaths and reset everything time and again. To verify this, I'm prepared to try something, to set a small goal. Fu Qian winked. To kill you 999 times. Your attitude earlier, instead of generously offering me advice, seemed more like you were desperately painting a picture of despair to steer me towards suicide. I'm not sure what would happen if I committed suicide, but I have a hunch it's not anything good. If I actually did that, the consequences would be, heh. So, die. You're simply unreasonable. You don't understand, please call me son of Bai Jinting. Fu Qian had always been a selectively patient person. As long as something interested him, he didn't mind spending extra time on it, repeating the most boring attempts with astounding patience. Actually, if Bai Jinting had been cautious enough, he should have pretended nothing had changed the second time he saw himself. That would have made him waste more time looking for other variables. Unfortunately, in an attempt to boast his fashionability, he even blurted out that his death dream could reset, which now made him the only known variable in this dream cage. As long as it was a variable, even if it was just a change in statistical numbers, it was worth another run. That's the quality of a top-tier player. Of course, it wasn't his fault. The degree of obsession, or rather, perversion, of some people might have exceeded his understanding. You, lunatic. Facing Fu Qian, who was closing in, Bai Jinting let out another cry of despair. You mean the lunatic of the dark moon? Sorry, I still fall a bit short compared to them. 41. 59. 69. 99. When Bai Jinting shattered to pieces for the 138th time, his wail echoed in the White Tower for a long time. By now, Fu Qian could do all this with his eyes closed. And this time, the dream did not rewind. Fu Qian opened his eyes to find the broken body of Bai Jinting before him, the divine favored one now utterly devoid of life. Indeed, there was a limit. 138, his definition of forever was truly shallow. Although the rewind hadn't occurred, the dream hadn't ended either. Fuqian looked at the still chaotic crowd below. Almost at the same moment, Fuqian felt the gaze of a special being upon him. The next instant, something heavy seemed to set upon him, linking his existence with the entire dream in a special way. What is this? Fuqian clenched his fist, feeling the ripples his actions caused around him. After Bai Jinting's death, had the gaze of that great being mentioned by him shifted to himself? Had he become the new king of the White Tower? Was he expected to kill himself next? No. It took only a second for Fuqian to dismiss the idea. His vitality was far greater than that of Bai Jinting. If he killed himself now, the most likely outcome would be triggering another rewind, and then he would have to repeat the process over and over until he collapsed completely. The number could very well be astronomical. Not to mention there was the possibility of dying for real and failing the mission. And there was an issue, judging by what had just happened, even if he died, it was hard to assure that the gaze of the being wouldn't just move on to someone else, creating a new king of the White Tower. Whatever the case, that was a last resort. Fuqian shook his head. Anyway, the notification of containment failure hadn't arrived, which meant there was still a way. One thing Bai Jinting said was quite true, the gaze of the great existence might not be a response to any devout prayers but merely attracted by something special. So the question was, why had Bai Jinting attracted the attention of the mysterious being behind it all? If it was because of the bizarre limb attachment technique, then Lu Ming and his peers should be more competitive. What was special about Bai Jinting? Fuqian thought for a moment, then looked towards the cage-like elevator at the side. At the beginning, the king of the White Tower had descended in that very elevator. Fuqian stepped forward and stood on it. The elevator began to slowly ascend, climbing towards the top of the White Tower. Overlooking the crowd below, which resembled ants, he began to understand why Bai Jinting liked riding this thing. Chapter 99, Chapter 99, Chapter 98, King of the White Tower, End, _1. Chapter 99, Chapter 98, King of the White Tower, End, _1. No wonder it's addictive to look down from above. Fuqian relished the feeling of being above everyone else as the elevator slowly ascended, eventually reaching the top floor. The entire top floor of the White Tower was the private space of Bai Jinting, housing his extremely luxurious office. However, when Fuqian stepped out of the elevator, there was constant noise inside, as if a group of gorillas were wrestling. Fuqian kicked open the already deformed door with one foot, and a gust of wind arose. Instantly a black shadow rushed out. Fuqian didn't dodge, but with a quicker response, he kicked the black shadow back. A shrill scream rang out, and a white long snake lay motionless on the ground. The head of the snake was that of a standard long-haired woman's face. The tail of the snake connected to a huge ball of snakes, from which another dozen heads extended, rampaging around the office. The image of this beauty snake was a bit challenging to the imagination. Looking at the clothes scattered all over the ground, these were probably Bai Jinting's secretaries. The rampaging ball of snakes was clearly attracted by the scream. They all stopped their movement and more than 10 faces turned towards that direction. The next moment, more than a dozen snake heads bit towards him together. Fuqian did not hold back at all, blowing them away with one air bullet, then started to observe the surrounding environment. Bai Jinting's office was spacious and luxurious, but the ball of snakes had clearly been rampaging for a while and now it looked as if it had been swept by a level 12 tornado, with overturned tables and chairs, and utter disarray. At this moment, the most eye-catching thing was a black stone screen placed in the middle. In the midst of the mess, this screen stood there intact, quite complete. On the surface of the screen, dense text was written from top to bottom, glowing brightly at the moment, and seemed to have a mysterious connection with the surroundings. This is. Fuqian had a good memory, and recognized at a glance the contents on it, which were none other than the widely disseminated White Tower Codex. It was said that the Codex was a work Bai Jinting took great pride in, with every rule written personally by him, and everyone entering the Ring Islands had to strictly follow it, including himself. Putting this thing in his office, although somewhat like performance art, was understandable. However, while everything else was in disarray, this item stood so orderly, it was a bit too out of the ordinary. Fuqian thought about it and tried firing an air bullet. Silently, the air bullet dissipated the moment it touched the screen, which showed no change whatsoever. No wonder it remained intact despite the rampage of the snakes. its existence was not normal. Freedom unconstrained, where beastliness meets divinity, yet the corners outside of the rules often rely on even stricter rules to exist. Fu Qian remembered the introduction he got when he first entered this place, which seemed to emphasize rules. Speaking of which, if Bai Jinting had something that set him apart, it was that he was the creator of the Ring Islands. He built this place and personally drafted the White Tower Codex as a code of conduct. It was these extremely broad rules that eventually made the Ring Islands what they are. Could this be the reason why Bai Jinting was under scrutiny? Just as when walking on the road, people don't pay attention to ants. But if the ants form a queue and make an Olympic 5 rings, then inevitably some would take interest, perhaps to take a photo or throw them a piece of candy. The wanton indulgence and the codex that everyone must obey formed such a unique symbol. So it didn't matter who the king of the White Tower was, as long as it stood, there would always be a king of the White Tower. Could it be that by destroying this thing, it might be possible to divert the attention of the entity behind it, allowing the dream to revert to reality? Although the idea was quite a leap, without any other leads, it was worth a try. Bold assumptions, careful verification, right. However, it had already been proven that this object couldn't be destroyed, direct obliteration was not an option. Was it possible to add new content and create some logical contradictions? Fu Qian quickly thought of an idea. He picked up a pen from the ground and tried writing. On the screen, discovering that marks could be left. Thus, imitating the existing format, he tried adding a rule at the end: it's possible to dirty the beach. However, the instant he finished writing, it was as if an eraser from the void wiped the line away, leaving it spotlessly clean. So, content that contradicted the existing rules was rejected, and couldn't be written down at all. This meant that the method of creating conflicts was also not feasible. Fu Qian thought for a moment and changed to a rule that was non-conflicting but irrelevant. This time the rule stayed on the surface, but the dream remained as stable as before. It seemed that such minor additions couldn't shake its essence at all. What could be done to change the essence of this thing? Fu Qian's mind raced wildly, then suddenly, inspiration struck. Swiftly, he penned a new line at the bottom: all interpretation rights of the above terms are reserved by White Tower Company. Almost instantaneously, Fu Qian felt something swiftly being stripped away from him. Soon after, the space began to violently shake, and seconds later, everything before his eyes shattered with a loud crash. The scene shifted, and Fu Qian found himself back in the stands of Bai Jinting's location, surrounded by severed limbs and remains that had lost all signs of life. Task completed, number 2-088 containment successful. The notification finally sounded in his ear. It really worked. As Fu Qian was marveling, a surge of thunderous lightning enveloped him. Demigodibu had finally arrived and, upon discovering Bai Jinting's death, struck out in anger. Yet, the terrifying lightning ultimately did not fall upon Fu Qian's head. The next moment, Fu Qian disappeared from inside the White Tower, and reappeared back in the warehouse. Containment successful. Task evaluation, unyielding. In the annual competitive festival, an assassin disguised as a participant murdered Bai Jinting, the CEO of White Tower Company, and Demigodibu temporarily took over the management of the Ring Islands. Under the deterrence of the demigod, order on the Ring Islands was swiftly restored. However, he was much stricter than the former CEO, and no longer tolerated certain behaviors, which robbed the islands of some of their vitality, gradually becoming mediocre. Indulgence under iron laws formed a symbol of special significance, gaining the potential to attract certain special existences. Bai Jinting, the creator of all this, often received inspiration in his dreams, which he used to continuously refine them. However, your act of desecration caused its fall from grace to the abyss. The indestructible king of the White Tower has disappeared, leaving behind only a hollow title, without any special powers. Kills: Bai Jinting, Mutant X9, Referee, Mao Yong, Taboo Crocodile Demon. Special achievement: 1 life clearance, containment completed in 1 attempt. Rewards: SAN points plus 37, inspiration plus 5, mythical form. Special achievement reward: Transcendence. Current SAN points 95, current inspiration 31. Would you like to play the event recap? Chapter 100, Chapter 100, Chapter 99 Mythical Form _1. Chapter 100, Chapter 99 Mythical Form _1. Done. After the task summary was finished, Fu Qian felt quite satisfied. Overall, aside from the monster's designs that could easily contaminate one's mind, the difficulty of this mission wasn't considered high. Even though the final dream sequence repeated over 100 times, he didn't find it tiring at all. Compared to the past, this was the first time he felt the sensation of grinding monsters. The key was that the monsters were helping with reloading, without consuming any SAN points. As a result, he achieved a feat of completing the mission on one life. As for replays, there was no need. He had no desire to watch some of the scenes from the recent task ever again. Being resistant doesn't mean having a unique taste. Besides that, the rewards were plentiful. After completing the task, his SAN points had reached 95, with triple digits just around the corner. Fu Qian first scrolled to the achievement's reward. Transcendence, skill, upon casting, returns you to your original starting point, limited to 1 use per containment. Note, a technique sought after by perfectionists, but rumored to increase the chances of failure. Return to the original starting point. That means restarting, right? You have to admit it fits well with the achievement of passing the game on 1 life. But this skill, hard to say whether it's good or bad. Fu Qian frowned in thought. Theoretically, this was definitely a strategic skill. On the one hand, each containment gave him another chance, almost doubling his SAN points. At the same time, it made him more flexible, basically allowing for a restart without waiting for a containment failure. But there lies the problem. Based on past mission experiences, many things don't become apparent until a life-and-death situation arises. Having the option to restart might lead to missing clues due to misjudgment. That's probably what the note was hinting at. Strategic skills shouldn't be over-relied on. Fu Qian quickly made his judgment and continued scrolling up to find another reward. Mythical form, your next attack escalates into a mythical form, consuming 1 SAN point per use. Note, peering into mythology means paying a price in sanity. This. Fu Qian was dumbfounded. 1 SAN point for him was like, no, 2 lives. Might as well rename it, bound together in life and death. Instantly, he felt like he didn't have enough SAN points. And there's another issue, it only says the skill is upgraded to mythical form, with no clarification on the actual effect. Considering the cost of testing it once, he could only look into it later. But it's a high-stakes skill, the effect surely can't be too shabby, right? This skill is even more strategic than Transcendence. No matter how you look at it, besides the basic reward, gaining 2 skills meant a grand harvest from this mission. Worth enduring all those grotesque scenes. Before leaving the storage, Fu Qian specifically found the place where Object 2-088 was kept. Trying to open the box, he found a grotesque-looking black and red crown inside, with dried blood on its sharp spikes. Green beans, tomatoes, beef, king prawns. Humming a tune, Fu Qian moved leisurely through the supermarket, continuously chucking food into his cart. Although his current physique meant he could survive without food, he never considered giving up this pleasure. Previously on the verge of eating dirt, he had only noodles and hot sauce for company, seldom visiting the supermarket. Now, posing as someone with an annual salary of 10 million, he had no issues affording the basic freedom of shopping. Of course, there was another important reason. Considering his work environment, Fu Qian thought it best to interact with human society now and then, otherwise, it would be all too easy to become abnormal without realizing it. Mr. Fu. The next moment, Fu Qian, who was wholly immersed in shopping, heard someone calling him from behind. It really is you. Turning around, there stood Pei Yanqing, with another girl's arm entwined with hers. Both of them had their eyes wide open, one with excitement and the other with curiosity. Hello. Fu Qian nodded. I heard that it was you who took me home yesterday, thank you for the trouble. Pei Yanqing sincerely expressed her gratitude. It was nothing. Fu Qian casually returned the politeness. This one definitely didn't know that, in fact, she was the actual victim. However, if it weren't for her reminder, he would have thought the incident took place several days ago. Could it be that the workload was indeed too much? Fu Qian gauged Pei Yanqing for a moment, she seemed to have recovered completely. Are you feeling all right now? I'm fine now, thank you for asking. Pei Yanqing smiled beautifully, her eyes not hiding her shock at Fu Qian's filled shopping cart. You've bought so much. Are you expecting guests? I have a rather good appetite. Fu Qian didn't feel inclined to explain further. Don't you have to work today? I only work there part-time. Pei Yanqing giggled. It's Friday today. We came out for some shopping to have hot pot tonight. Life at Linkheng University indeed seemed colorful. Fu Qian nodded without saying anything else. At this time, the girl beside Pei Yanqing pulled at her clothes, and Pei Yanqing suddenly remembered something. I forgot to introduce her. This is my dorm mate. The other girl, named He Xian, also had a lovely appearance, her bright eyes sparkling with vitality. After a brief greeting, Pei Yanqing was quickly pulled away to continue shopping, and their conversation drifted over. You didn't exaggerate this time. Of course, I didn't. Someone as handsome as him stood you up. Seriously. Why would I lie to you? I saw with my own eyes how he finished an entire table of food by himself. I can't think of anyone who would be so heartless. Wait, you didn't specifically come all this way to buy stuff hoping to run into him, did you? What do you think I am, a psychic? To predict that I'd bump into him here. Watching the two walk away, Fu Qian posed and thought. This He Xian had thought of the same question as him. Linkheng University was neither close nor too far away from here, with several places to buy groceries in between. There indeed was no need to come all this way specifically. Pei Yanqing's response seemed very natural, with no trace of a guilty conscience, and that was precisely the concern. If she intended to find him to express gratitude, that would be normal. The fear was that she might not even be aware of the real issue, having subconsciously chosen this place. Key is, she had also happened to run into him. It all seemed a bit too coincidental. Had his existence begun to exert some special influence over this world? Such matters held no interest for him. Nevertheless, since she was a victim of his own oversight, he might as well lend a hand. Shaking his head inwardly, Fu Qian grabbed a pack of cola from the shelf and casually tossed it outward. Following a perfect parabola, the cola hit a young man passing by the two girls squarely, knocking him to the ground. Caught completely off guard, the young man rolled on the ground from the forceful impact. Pei Yanqing and He Xian were startled and instinctively moved to help, but the men swiftly got up and ran away. Chapter 101, Chapter 101, Chapter 100 Praise the Sun _1. Chapter 101, Chapter 100 Praise the Sun _1. Stealing phones nowadays, simply outrageous. The technique was so crude, obviously the work of an amateur. After throwing the cola, Fu Qian had no interest in joining the fuss, he just kept shopping with his cart, keeping a low profile. In the past, even if he intended to stop it, he would probably choose other methods. But now, he'd started to act first rather than waste words. A direct hit to the head could certainly knock someone down, but that would probably attract the police, and since the thief didn't succeed, it would complicate things. After buying everything he needed, Fu Qian packed his haul into 3 large bags, feeling satisfied as he left the supermarket. It was getting late outside, and Fu Qian initially wanted to take a taxi home. Unfortunately, he noticed that as soon as he stepped out, a certain car started following him. Definitely not professionals, they didn't even understand the concept of cutting losses in time. Probably stole the phone just for kicks, much like what they were about to do now. Fu Qian gave up the idea of hailing a taxi and continued on his way. The car behind him maintained a leisurely pace, patiently following along. Looking for a place without surveillance cameras? Fu Qian totally understood the intentions of those in the car. After following him with astonishing patience for a full kilometer, they reached a stone bridge. This stone bridge had been there as long as Fu Qian could remember, once a main thoroughfare in Linkheng. But after the highway was rerouted, it saw little traffic and was practically abandoned, with only a few people taking it as a shortcut and grass even starting to grow on its surface. As expected, Fu Qian wasn't let down. As they reached the middle of the bridge, the pursuing car suddenly accelerated, then screeched to a halt with a sharp turn and switched on its high beams, illuminating the area. Indeed, one of the most annoying behaviors. As he looked around at the blinding whiteness, Fu Qian couldn't help but remark. At that moment, the car doors opened and 5 people, exuding momentum, got out and blocked the way. Fu Qian glanced at them, they all looked quite young, almost like students. Furthermore, judging by their clothes and accessories, they didn't look short on money, probably just enthusiasts. Easily, Qian recognized one of them as the person who had attempted to steal the phone. His arm was still hanging somewhat limply, suggesting the can had hit him hard. "It's him." Another one pointed at Qian and said. The perpetrator surely didn't know who Qian was. This must be the lookout. Qian silently made his judgment. Lit up. One in a white coat, clearly the leader, looked Qian up and down after hearing the question and asked a strange question. "Not bad." Qian nodded. Anyone else would probably be unable to open their eyes at this point. But such a stimulus was nothing to him now. "Take a good look, you might not get the chance again." The man in the white coat smiled and gestured with his hand, and the others quickly surrounded him. "Are you implying I won't live to see tomorrow's sun?" Qian blinked and asked. "Hard to say." The man in the white coat shook his head. "It mostly depends on your constitution." "All right then." Qian looked around to confirm there was no one else on the bridge. "No need to look, there's no one around, this is a pretty good spot." The man in the white coat exclaimed with some satisfaction. "Nonsense, could the place I chose be unsuitable?" Qian thought to himself, and at that moment, he heard the wind from behind. Someone couldn't wait to take action. San value decreased by 1. Qian didn't hesitate and immediately activated the new skill he had just acquired. Mythical form was too costly to use, and he hadn't planned on testing it so soon. But having materials delivered to his door wasn't so bad either. Both air bullet and visceral critical strike were too bloody in effect. After considering his few skills, Qian eventually activated Decree Residue. After much thought, it seemed the gentlest, and with previous experience to draw on, it was easier to compare the results. For an instant, it was as if the day had dawned. Qian had never imagined the effect would be so exaggerated. The moment Decree Residue was activated, a brilliant torch descended upon the earth. The golden splendid light spread in all directions, unstoppable, penetrating everything. Qian felt his body enter a special state, bright and translucent, as if ready to melt at any moment. Praise the sun. In view of the scene, Qian couldn't help but raise his hands, forming a Y shape with his body, making a classic pose. 2 seconds later, the glow faded. The 5 people before him stood there dumbly, with vacant expressions, seemingly their brains had gone blank. The effect was indeed impressive, was that the full manifestation of Decree Residue. He could distinctly feel he was enveloped by a divine and glorious aura, which even carried a hint of the higher-order transformational aura within it. Just like the tree atop the volcano crater. It appears that mythical form isn't just a simple amplification of power. Based on Pei Yanqing's reaction before, these individuals likely wouldn't wake up for a while. Exactly how long it would take for them to recover depended on their constitution. Of course, it could also be forever. However, Qian didn't feel any psychological burden about it. Everyone was out to fend for themselves, surely, they must have that much understanding. Picking the items back up from the ground, he made a detour and left the place. Abnormal flash in the eastern suburbs of the city, suspected unidentified flying object, 5 witnesses suffering mental stimuli, currently receiving treatment. The next day, Qian saw such news in the push notifications. According to the newspaper, those 5 had stayed on the bridge for most of the night, and when they were found, they were all muttering so bright, without exception. As for the cause of the incident, there were a myriad of theories: aliens, UFOs, laser weapons, Buddha's manifestation, and various other speculations were endless. Nobody suspected it was man-made. After quickly reading through the news, Qian placed his phone on the table and put on his work badge. Identity verification complete, work for the day begins. Warning, containment breach. The warehouse did not disappoint him, displaying what seemed like a sieve-like storage capability. Name, messenger, code, 3-0177. Today's work content has been updated. Enter the containment scene of 3-0177, complete recontainment. Finally, a task starting with a 3. Qian was greatly relieved for a moment. Based on his brief previous experience, items starting with a 3 should be relatively simple, and he shouldn't face particularly tricky situations. He could relax a bit, right? Entering containment scene of 3-0177, Shangjing. 4%, 6%, 10%, 18%, 34%, 66%, 100%, containment scene loading complete. As the biggest city on the west coast, Shangjing is a gathering place for numerous transcendents, also one of the areas with the strictest oversight by the night watchman. But on this day, an item deeply hidden by the night watchman was incredibly stolen, triggering a series of reactions. Find the stolen thorn blood before the night watchman does. Chapter 102, Chapter 102, Chapter 101 Hunter's Thirst for Blood _1. Chapter 102, Chapter 101 Hunter's Thirst for Blood _1. Containment Achievement Condition, find the stolen thorn blood. Current Sanity, 93, Current Inspiration, 31. Skills, Air Bullet, Visceral Critical Strike, Cat School, Feast, Locked, Decree Residue, Transcendence, Mythical Form. Weapon, Tyrant's Fist. With the addition of the 2 newly acquired skills, the total number of skills had now increased to 7, and Fuqian naturally brought them all along without any reservations. So far, he had not encountered any situation that limited the number of skills he could carry, leading Fuqian to speculate that he had not yet reached the cap on the total number of skills. If one day he had too many skills, he might need to make some tough choices. As his spiritual consciousness slowly recovered, Fuqian surveyed his surroundings. Is this a bookstore? It wasn't an offhand remark. Before him was a modestly sized space with several brown bookshelves standing erect, lined with rows of books of various colors. Considering the direction of the sunlight, it must have just passed noon, with a few people strolling in the store in pairs and threes. At the moment, he was leaning against a sofa chair, a soft cushion supporting his neck, and before him was a small wooden counter. What a leisurely bookstore afternoon, this job setting wasn't too shabby. Fuqian stretched lazily without letting his guard down. Just think about the time on the Ring Islands, it all started with sunny skies and soft sand, who would have thought it would get so bizarre later on? As an avid reader, Fuqian had once entertained the idea of opening a bookstore himself, as it would provide a legitimate excuse to slack off and read books. But after some research, he found that being a bookstore owner wasn't as carefree as it seemed. Beyond sitting there collecting money, there were also tasks like shelving, inventory, bookkeeping, restocking, and a myriad of other chores. Even to keep the finances afloat, one would still need to set up areas for popular exam guides, which is why he ultimately abandoned the idea. Today, however, he could take the opportunity to experience the life of a bookstore owner for himself. How much is this? Just then, a customer approached with a book and asked Fuqian. $1. Fuqian didn't even raise his head. Aren't you going to check what book it is? No need. You have to be a little dashing in life. After all, the money earned here couldn't be taken back with him. Watching the customer hurry off after leaving the money, Fuqian looked at the few people still milling about in the store. Is this a mistake? This is a high martial world, and they're using their precious time to read books. Go home and practice on the punching bag. Sorry everyone, the store is closed, Fuqian declared, after giving it some thought and rapping on the counter. But it's only 1:30. The customer's complaints were ineffectual. Fuqian simply transformed into a willful owner and shooed everyone out. The bookstore regained its peace, and Fuqian leaned back in his chair, savoring the expensive quiet time. However, the tranquil moment didn't last long. About 10 minutes later, a breeze blew in. The door of the bookstore first opened silently, then closed again. As he looked up, there was already an additional person on the sofa in the store. From the side, one could see a middle-aged man about 40 years old, with sharp facial features and piercing eyes. Of course, most importantly, this man was a transcendent. The series of actions he'd just demonstrated were not something an ordinary person could perform. The middle-aged man was at this moment leisurely flipping through a booklet, his back to him. Ding-e, 30 years old, unemployed, your uncle passed away a month ago, and you came from out of town to inherit this bookstore. Is this your information? He asked slowly, reciting a series of details. It could be, Fuqian responded amiably. Humph. The middle-aged man let out a cold snort, stood up, and walked over to the counter, slamming the booklet down hard. When you forged this information, did you not put any heart into it, or do you think so little of the night watchman's professionalism? To make it easier for you to understand the current situation, let me introduce myself first, Qin Feng, captain of the first squad of the 2nd detachment of the night watchmen in Shangjing City. Qin Feng stared into Fuqian's eyes. I hope you answer the following questions truthfully. believe me, it's definitely for your own good. It was indeed the night watchman. Fu Qian's mind stirred. From the recent task briefing, he knew the night watchman had just lost something important. Logically, they would definitely take action. This one most likely came for that reason. First of all, your last name isn't Ding, you aren't 30 years old either. Seeing Fu Qian remain silent, Qin Feng let out a cold laugh. Fang Sun, 25 years old, an 8th phase transcendent, arrived in Shangjing 10 days ago. Am I right? You know all this. Fu Qian commented without much energy. Of course, we know. There are always some who hope to get lucky and think they can fool our sight. Let me tell you the truth, every transcendent who enters Shangjing, even if you don't report voluntarily, will be recorded right away. We just normally can't be bothered to deal with you. Very high-end indeed. Fu Qian blinked, detecting another layer of meaning in these words. So, there is a situation right now. Can you tell me what happened? Enough with the nonsense, I'm the one asking the questions here. Qin Feng slapped the counter, making it squeak alarmingly. Tell me, what is the real purpose of your visit to Shangjing? Haven't you already seen? Fu Qian gestured around him. To open a shop, study, enjoy the life of a big city. Bullshit. You better not hold on to any hope for luck. If you don't cooperate, don't blame me for not being polite. By the end of it, Qin Feng's voice was harsh with anger. Not being polite in what way? Drag me back for a harsh interrogation. That would actually be just perfect. According to the task's description, that thorn blood was stolen from the night watchman base. This would be a good opportunity to find out more about the situation. I need you to properly explain why you would do something abnormal like forging documents. What is your motive? Good question, I'd like to know that myself. Unfortunately, I have no knowledge of any prior information. The truth is, even Fu Qian didn't know as much about the current situation as this night watchman. Even the names Ding Yi and Fang Sun were informed to him. In the past, when carrying out containment missions, he always appeared under his real identity, and everyone around was familiar with his appearance. This time, however, it was a double-layered pretense, truly puzzling. As Fu Qian furrowed his brow in thought, Qin Feng beside him lost his patience. Just as he was about to yell at this obstinate fellow again, his expression suddenly twisted in extreme pain. Simultaneously, Fu Qian sensed an unusual fluctuation and immediately retreated several steps. The next moment, Qin Feng's facial features twisted violently, his entire head swelled, and then exploded with a bang. Blood and brains scattered across the entire bookstore. So, the cooler one's entrance, the quicker one dies. Fu Qian looked around the mess, stunned for a long time. Had it not been for his quick reaction to escape the explosion, he would have been smothered in it. Speaking of being covered, Fu Qian suddenly remembered something. He quickly went to the restroom and found a mirror. Indeed, the face in the mirror wasn't his own. Part 6 of the series ends here. Thank you for watching and listening. If you find it interesting, please give us a like, a comment and a subscription so that we have the motivation to make the next videos.